Chapter 1429. Unlin was cultivating his new spell technique by the lake. Dabai immediately rushed over with excitement in his voice. "Big Brotherin, there's a very special guest who wants to visit. Woof! What kind of guest is this? You're drooling." Unlin wore a disdainful expression. "You'll know once you go take a look, it's a super special guest. Woof!" Dabai was extremely excited. "Who is it? Why are they being so mysterious?" Unlin looked at Dabai with a suspicious expression before riding Dabai toward the front hall. Soon, he saw many beautiful women. They were a group of young ladies dressed in light blue dresses. Their skin was as white as snow and they were as pure as ice. All of them wore friendly yet timid smiles upon seeing Unlin. Unlin drew a sharp intake of breath upon seeing this group of beautiful women. There were a dozen or so powerful snow maidens standing in front of him. The snow maidens had barged into the kingdom of the 9 states to visit him? What were they trying to do? Unlin's heart jolted with shock, but his expression remained calm and collected. He could no longer maintain his composure when a beautiful woman in a white priestess robe made her way toward him. "Shangguan-yi, you're here too!" Unlin let loose a cry of surprise. The woman wore a faint smile on her face as she bowed slightly toward Unlin. "Snow Maiden High Priestess Shangguan-yi pays her respects to sect leader Unlin." Unlin faltered slightly upon hearing the term, High Priestess, but he didn't say anything. At his level, even if the High Priestess were to come here in person, he wouldn't be too affected by her presence. The only thing that made him sigh with resignation was the fact that Shangguan-yi, who was willing to give her everything for the Vermilion Bird sect, had chosen to become a snow maiden in the end. "Please take a seat, Ms. Shangguan-yi." Unlin smiled. Shangguan-yi sat down gracefully with a hint of elegance on her face. "We're sorry for intruding upon your sect. As for the issue of safety, we've already submitted a report to the Celestial Court, and the Celestial Dharch has granted us permission to travel to the 4-9 Immortal sect in person." Unlin's expression shifted slightly. Even though the Kingdom of the 9 States and the Snow Maidens had chosen a temporary truce due to the changes in the Holy Glacial Lands, the Kingdom of the 9 States and the Snow Maidens had decided to call a truce. But subconsciously, they still treated each other as enemies. Now, the Celestial Dharch was willing to let the Snow Maidens into the Kingdom of the 9 States? This was quite novel. "All right, that's not a problem. You're welcome to stay at the 4-9 Immortal sect in the future. After all, we're all family." Unlin raised an eyebrow at Shangguan-yi with a knowing expression. "How dare you? How dare you take liberties with our High Priestess?" A return to Void stage, Snow Maiden mighty figure roared with rage. "That's enough, Yanhua. Sect leader Unlin was only joking," Shangguan-yi said with an enraged expression as a rare blush appeared on her face. "No, I'm serious," Unlin said with a serious expression. Shangguan-yi, Yanhua, all of the Snow Maidens were enraged. Was Unlin trying to steal their High Priestess right in front of them? "I'm actually here to ask sect leader Unlin for a favor." Shangguan-yi paused momentarily before speaking in an indifferent voice. "What is it? Go ahead." A friendly smile appeared on Unlin's face as he summoned a dozen or so purple spirit fruits through spell techniques before distributing them to all of the Snow Maidens. Each and every one of these spirit fruits was quite valuable. All of the Snow Maidens were a little flattered, and they didn't know whether they should accept them or not. What kind of person would entertain guests with spirit fruits? This was way too extravagant. "Here's a small token of my appreciation. It must have been difficult for all of you to come all the way here." A warm smile appeared on Unlin's face, as if the Snow Maidens standing before him were not enemies, but rather good friends from afar. Shangguan-yi immediately extended a respectful salute. "Thank you, sect leader Unlin." All of the other Snow Maidens also extended respectful salutes before accepting the spirit fruits. Some of them were touched, while others were quite uneasy. Yanhua was feeling even more conflicted. She was the leader of the Holy Palace, but she had never treated her subordinates so well before. The Snow Maidens were already quite poor, and now that they had lost their homes due to war and disaster, spirit fruits were even more precious to them. All of the Snow Maidens present were of high social status, but some of them might not even have a single spirit fruit in their entire storage ring. And Lin could tell from the expressions on the Snow Maidens' faces that they had been through a rough time recently. He was naturally not going to sympathize with them, but he wasn't going to celebrate either. Instead, he turned to Shangguan Yi with a concerned expression. "Sister Shangguan, what can I do for you?" The Snow Maidens had obviously sent Shangguan Yi here because they were aware of the relationship between him and Shangguan Yi, and they were hoping that she would be more amicable. And Lin was also quite curious. What could make the proud Snow Maidens lower their heads and beg for help from their enemies? Shangguan Yi nodded slightly before turning to Lin with a pair of warm, clear eyes. "Then I'll get straight to the point. The Snow Maidens are currently facing the threat of extinction, and we would like to ask for your help." And Lin couldn't help but burst into laughter. "Ask for my help? Let me finish first." A beseeching expression appeared on Shangguan Yi's face. "We'll definitely give you a satisfactory reward." "Go on," Lin replied. "About a year ago, many of the Snow Maidens were killed or injured by the relentless barrage of snow mountains. Do you still remember?" Shangguan Yi asked. "I do." And Lin's interest was piqued a little. "In the end, the living being that through the snow mountains came to your celestial court and was killed by your celestial court, right?" Shangguan Yi stared at Lin. Lin's eyes narrowed slightly. "I recall that everyone in the celestial court has sworn Dao heart vows to keep this a secret. How do you know about this?" Shangguan Yi replied honestly. "Our great Empress detected this with her divine eye of the Ice Matriarch. Not only that, but she also knows that you were the one who killed the living being that through the snow mountains." Lin heaved a forlorn sigh. "I'm really sorry to have shown you how bad *SS I am. Shangguan Yi, fame was the bane of men, and fattiness was the bane of men." Lin had finally become a bad *SS for once, but even his enemies had come to him for help. What the hell was going on? Shangguan Yi paused momentarily before continuing. "Recently, our Snow Maidens have been targeted by another terrifying enemy. Its power is similar to that of the mysterious living being that through the snow mountains. Our Snow Maidens are no match for it, and our entire tribe is in danger of being wiped out." "Another one?" Lin's expression also shifted. He knew what that kind of living being represented. It was a being manifested from the heavenly Tao and wielded the paramount power of laws. Normal Snow Maidens were naturally no match for it. Even the Tao integration stage Snow Maiden Empresses would find it difficult to deal with. A thought suddenly occurred to Lin, and he asked nervously, "It's not going to attack the Celestial Court after bullying you, right? Just like the heavenly wind god who threw the snow mountains?" Shangguan Yi shook her head. "It has set a countdown timer for our entire tribe. If we don't do something, we won't be able to live for more than 10 days. Lin. Chapter 1430. Extinction Countdown? What the hell is that?" Lin asked with a curious expression. Shangguan Yi replied with a grave expression, "It's a mysterious power that has been branded into the minds of all Snow Tribe living beings. When the time is up, all of us will die." Lin's brows furrowed slightly. "How do you know that all of you will die when the time is up? Maybe it's just scaring you, or maybe you'll suddenly become ugly when the time is up or something else. Wouldn't that be even more terrifying?" Yan Hua let loose a cry of surprise. "Shangguan Yi, ahem." Shangguan Yi coughed lightly before glaring at Yan Hua with a hint of resentment in her eyes. After Yan Hua fell silent, she continued, "That's because there have been over 1,300 Snow Maidens who have experienced the exact same countdown. When the time is up, all of their vitality will abruptly disappear, and they will melt into puddles of snow water. Even the great Empress can't save them." At first, everyone was just panicking, but we weren't in despair yet. But now, the exact same countdown has appeared in the minds of over 100 million snow maidens, and we're on the brink of collapse. There are still over 9 days left on the countdown. If we can't find a solution within this period of time, we're really going to be wiped out. Shangguani paused momentarily before continuing. The great empress wanted to get rid of the countdown in her mind, but she sensed an extremely similar power coming from it. It was as if the countdown had been enshrouded by an absolute protective barrier that could keep out all powers in this world. It was almost identical to the barrier that enveloped the surface of the snow mountains. This is no longer a problem that we snow maidens can deal with. We have to find a powerful being who can break through this barrier and defeat that mysterious living being. Coincidentally, the strange phenomenon that had occurred in the celestial court reminded us of something. The great empress used her ice matriarch divine eye to investigate the matter, and she finally saw the savior who could save our entire tribe. Shangguan-Yi turned to Enlin with anticipation in her eyes. The other snow maidens also turned to Enlin with pleading and helpless expressions on their faces. Enlin knew that there was no point in denying it now. He turned toward the snow maidens with a calm smile. "All right, I won't deny that I'm bad *SS, but why should I save you? You should know that you almost killed me before. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that you are mortal enemies." Enlin looked at the snow maidens before him with a menacing expression. "If all of you die, the kingdom of the 9 states will have one less enemy. So, give me a reason why I should save you. If you're worried that we'll become your enemies, then we can all swear Dao Heart vows to never harm a single person from the kingdom of the 9 states again." Yen Hua interjected. A smile appeared on Enlin's face. "You guys were wiped out by that mysterious living being, but isn't the result the same for the kingdom of the 9 states? You've even gotten rid of all future troubles." Yen Hua choked and her eyes reddened. It was still very hurtful to hear someone mention the annihilation of the snow maidens in such a nonchalant manner. Shangguan-Yi pursed her lips and turned to Enlin. "As long as you're willing to save us and allow our tribe to continue to exist, we're willing to do anything." All of the snow maidens were grief-stricken upon hearing this. They didn't say anything. It was clear that they were already mentally prepared for this to happen. This was the will of the great empress and the high priestess. "What do you mean by everything?" Enlin was a little hesitant. "The power and treasures of our entire tribe will all belong to you. You will be our leader from now on." Shangguan-Yi raised her golden eyes to look at Enlin with tears welling up in her eyes. "But please, please leave some dignity for our tribe and treat them as living beings." All of the snow maidens lowered their heads. Some of them even gripped the corners of their clothes tightly as their bodies trembled uncontrollably. Enlin fell silent. He knew how much Shangguan-Yi and the snow maidens had to go through in order to make this decision, and he knew what kind of indignation and humiliation they had to endure. Who would have thought that the once powerful snow maidens would be reduced to such a pitiful state? Enlin heaved a forlorn sigh. All of the snow maidens' expressions darkened upon hearing this. Some of them were already sobbing uncontrollably as they thought back to their past experiences. A sudden calamity forced them to leave their homeland and engage in incessant battles. For a piece of land, they would even stain the entire opposite shore realm with the blood of the snow maidens. Now, a calamity had suddenly befallen them. What had they done to deserve such a terrifying calamity? Enlin didn't look at the snow maidens' expressions. Instead, he turned to Shangguan-Yi. "Tell me, why are you doing this for the snow maidens?" "I'm also a snow maiden, and I also have a death timer." "I don't want to die," Shangguan-Yi replied. "I want to hear the truth." Enlin was a little enraged. He knew that this was a woman who was willing to give up her life to save a fellow disciple even though she had been given the cold shoulder, so she wasn't afraid of death. A conflicted expression appeared on Shangguan-Yi's face, and she paused momentarily before a wry smile appeared on her face. "All right, Enlin, I'll tell you the truth. Priestess, don't. You can't tell me. Have you forgotten what you promised the great Empress? All of the higher-ups of the Snow Maiden's expressions shifted drastically upon hearing Shangguan Yi's words. A comforting smile appeared on Shangguan Yi's face. Don't worry, I know what kind of person Enlin is. He won't hurt me. She continued in a soft voice. I am actually the reincarnation of the Ice Matriarch and the hope of the Snow Maiden tribe's revival. I've known this ever since the Ice Matriarch's soul aura was awakened within my body. As the Snow Matriarch, my body, my blood, and my soul won't allow me to stand by and watch as their tribe is wiped out. Enlin was shocked. He clearly didn't think that Shangguan Yi would have such an identity. Shangguan Yi flipped her hand over, and a triangular crystal appeared in her palm. The crystal exuded an extremely gentle blue light, and it shimmered as if it were a living being. This is the heart of the Ice Matriarch, and it's also my heart. Shangguan Yi's brows furrowed slightly as she held onto Enlin's hand before spreading it open, and the crystal fell into Enlin's palm. A smile appeared on her face. Now my life is also yours. Please save us. Enlin was a little dazed. He could sense that the crystal before him was connected to Shangguan Yi's life. Initially, the Great Empress and the High Priestess had only sent Shangguan Yi here as a gesture of goodwill. However, he didn't think that they would send the most important member of the Snow Maiden tribe here. The Patriarch of the Snow Maiden tribe was begging Enlin with her life. All of the Snow Maidens were already sobbing uncontrollably. They hadn't asked Shangguan Yi to give the heart of the Ice Matriarch to Enlin. Only now did they realize just how far Shangguan Yi would go to save her entire tribe. She was betting her everything on this man. Chapter 1431. Enlin, what else do you want us to do for you to help us? Tears welled up in Shangguan Yi's eyes. Tell us, and we'll do our best to satisfy you. Enlin fell silent again as he stared blankly at the triangular crystal in his hand. How about this, I can help you. He heaved a forlorn sigh. All of the Snow Maidens were elated to hear this, and they turned to Enlin with anticipation in their eyes. But I have to ask someone for their permission first. I can only do this if she agrees, Enlin said with a firm expression. Shangguan Yi's heart jolted with shock. Who could be so powerful that Enlin had to ask for his permission? Could it be some reclusive mighty figure? You guys wait here for me. Enlin drifted away. All right, I'll wait for you. Shangguan Yi nodded obediently. Within the main pavilion of the Flame Pavilion. Xiaolan, what do you think? Enlin asked with a fawning expression. A dejected expression appeared on Su Xiaolan's face. Who would have thought that Sister Shangguan Yi's true identity would be the Ice Matriarch of the Snow Maidens? There's no turning back now. She's embarked on a completely different path from us after all. There were many things in this world that could force people to walk a completely different path without any hesitation. She couldn't make them stay, nor could she. Enlin smiled. How is that a completely different path? They can promise me anything. I can just ask Sister Shangguan Yi to come back to the Vermilion Bird sect. They can promise you anything? Su Xiaolan raised an eyebrow. She felt like this was not a simple matter. Enlin immediately replied, but I won't make them do anything. I'll make them swear a Dao heart vow to never harm the human race again, then use them as my subordinates. Su Xiaolan nodded and heaved a forlorn sigh. All right, but let's not force Sister Shangguan Yi to do anything. After all, you can't force her to do anything. Xiaolan, you agree? Enlin suddenly became excited. Su Xiaolan poked Enlin's forehead with a slender finger. There are so many Snow Maidens listening to you all of a sudden, so don't you dare try anything funny. Enlin wore a serious expression. Don't you know what kind of person I am? How would I know what kind of person you are behind the scenes? Su Xiaolan pouted. By the way, if you think you can't beat the enemy in this battle, then don't fight. She thought to herself for a moment before gripping tightly onto Enlin's hand. Neither the lives of the entire Snow Maiden race nor Sister Shangguan Yi's life are as important as yours, understand? Su Xiaolan initially didn't want Enlin to battle that strange living being. She knew what that kind of living being entailed. It was a being that was at least on the same level as the heavenly wind god. Just one of those terrifying beings had almost wiped out the celestial court. If it weren't for the fact that this matter concerned the safety of the entire human race, and that Enlin possessed the power to repress that kind of living being, she would never allow Enlin to take such a risk. Enlin kissed Su Xiaolan's forehead with a smile upon seeing her concerned expression. Don't worry, I'll run away as soon as things go south. I'll definitely prioritize my own safety above all else. Su Xiaolan nodded with relief upon hearing Enlin's promise. After receiving Su Xiaolan's approval, Enlin sent a voice transmission talisman to the Celestial Dharch to brief him on the situation. The Celestial Dharch expressed that there were no issues, but he had one request, which was that all of the Snow Maidens who had participated in the battle against the human race should be imprisoned and punished. Enlin relayed the Celestial Thearcha's request to Shangguan Yi. Shangguan Yi immediately expressed that there were no issues and that she would abide by their arrangements. Thus, Enlin formed a temporary alliance with the Snow Maidens. All of the Snow Maidens present burst into tears, as if they had just completed an extremely important mission. Enlin immediately told them to stop crying. Otherwise, if outsiders were to see them, they would think that he had done something evil to these beautiful Snow Maidens. Enlin, don't you want my Heart of the Ice Matriarch anymore? Shangguan Yi held an extremely intricate and dreamy triangular ice crystal in her hands as she looked up at him with her golden eyes. With the Heart of the Ice Matriarch in your possession, no Snow Maiden will dare to do anything to you. Enlin shook his head with a smile. Won't it have the same effect if I make you swear Dao Heart vows? Besides, I don't have a habit of taking other people's hearts. Xiaolan's heart is enough for me. Shangguan Yi faltered slightly upon hearing this before a knowing smile finally appeared on her face. Her smile was as pure and beautiful as a snow lotus. She looked at Enlin with anticipation in her eyes. Sister Xiaolan, I wish you all the best. I hope I can live to witness your wedding. Don't worry, I've promised to help you, so I'll do my best to keep you alive. Enlin nodded with an earnest expression. Let's go. He didn't bring anyone with him this time. After all, this was an opponent that even a Dao integration stage super mighty figure couldn't handle, so it wouldn't matter how many people he brought with him. Right at this moment, the space around the 4-9 Immortal Sect was torn open again. A graceful man in a golden and white imperial robe appeared before Enlin with a warm smile on his face. Mr. Enlin, I'll come with you. Celestial Dharch, why are you here? Enlin let loose a cry of surprise. Shangguan Yi and the Snow Maidens all extended respectful salutes upon seeing the newcomer. Haha, I just want to collect some data. You know who I am, so I have to understand things like this in order to better complete my mission. The Celestial Dharch smiled. Enlin nodded in agreement upon hearing this. Shangguan Yi and the others naturally didn't dare to disagree. In other words, time was of the essence, and they could do whatever they wanted. Thus, Enlin, the Celestial Dharch, and the Snow Maidens tore open space and traveled toward the border of the opposite shore realm in the southwestern region of the Holy Glacial Lands. This was where the Snow Maidens were temporarily residing, and it was also where the strange events had taken place. Speaking of which, Shui Zhantian is still in the Holy Glacial Lands, right? I wonder how he's doing now. Enlin suddenly thought of his adorable beast pet as he traveled through space, and he was a little concerned. The current Holy Glacial Lands was not a good place to be. The environment here was far more hostile than it had been in the past, and there were countless perilous zones and perilous zones. Even the Return to Void stage mighty figures of the Tai Chu continent were extremely wary of this place. At this moment, within the Holy Glacial Land. Wah, Big Sister Long, I'm a lonely little ball of fur with no one to rely on. Please have mercy and take me with you. The little ball of fur had large, blue ripples in its eyes, and it flapped its little wings before pouncing onto a woman's chest. You clearly have a master, and I can sense the power of the contract from your body. Stop bothering me. The beautiful and heroic woman picked up the ball of fur on her chest with a disgruntled expression. I'm going to hit you if you keep this up. The dragon tribe servants behind her immediately couldn't bear to see this. Ancient Dragon Empress, please don't hit it. This little animal is so adorable, why are you hitting it? Chapter 1432. The Ancient Dragon Empress was a little depressed. She had only just progressed to the Tao integration stage and hadn't even had a chance to hold a tribe celebration, but an adorable snowball-like living being suddenly approached her. It insisted that they were the same kind of people and that it wanted to recognize her as its master. If it weren't for the fact that this snowball-like living being was far too adorable, she would have flattened it with a slap a long time ago. So you're going to follow me, right? The Ancient Dragon Empress asked with a resigned expression. I, Shuizhantian, am a man of my word. If I say I'm going to follow you, I'll definitely follow you. The little snow monster replied with a serious expression. That's right, it was none other than Shuizhantian, who had been attracted by the changes taking place in the holy glacial lands. All right then, establish a beast pet contract with me. The Ancient Dragon Empress heaved a forlorn sigh. She wasn't an adorable little girl. Instead, she was the leader of the evil dragons, but it wasn't a bad thing to have such an adorable pet to hug. Shuizhantian nodded and was just about to agree. All of a sudden, the image of a tall and mighty man who looked as if he were going to crush the heavens appeared in his mind. That man was also a being that he yearned to pursue, even though he hadn't progressed to the Tao integration stage yet. His heaven-defying, heaven-crushing, and heaven-crushing aura was emanating from his body, and he was completely mesmerized. Let's not rush things. I think we should start off as friends and slowly build up our relationship. How about that, big sister dragon tribe? Shuizhantian looked up at the Ancient Dragon Empress with an adorable expression. The Ancient Dragon Empress didn't mind. Up to you. Having such an adorable creature to keep her company during this long journey was quite a good thing. Heavy snow fell. Tens of thousands of dragon tribe cultivators followed behind her on their long and arduous journey. A series of dragon-like footprints were left in the snow before being buried by the snow. After a short while, the Ancient Dragon Empress raised her head to look at a ball of golden light in the distance, and a smile finally appeared on her face. We're almost there. They were heading toward the heaven-crushing sex base, the land of eternal light. Opposite shore realm. At the Snow Maiden's temporary residence. A pitch-black crack split open in the sky and extended. A snowy white hand then tore open the rift. One by one, figures began to emerge from the crack. Down below, hundreds of thousands of snow maidens had already gathered on a vast expanse of silvery white land. They bowed in unison and yelled in unison. The Snow Maidens welcomed sect leader Enlin, High Priestess Shangguan Yi, and the celestial Tharch of the Kingdom of the Nine States. Enlin was shocked by the formation in front of him. Shangguan Yi's smile did not falter in the slightest, as if she was already used to scenes like this. Everyone, please rise. Sect leader Enlin is our hope, so you must fulfill your promise to him. Yes. Hundreds of thousands of snow maidens yelled in unison. All of the snow maidens looked up at Enlin with scorching curiosity in their eyes. This was the first time that Enlin had ever been the center of so many beautiful women's attention. However, he had already developed a certain level of resistance due to the fact that he had been worshipped by so many beautiful women in the Divine Source continent. As such, he maintained a nonchalant expression. The Snow Empress and the current High Priestess, Mengji, also came to welcome them. Their expressions didn't change much at the sight of the celestial Tharch. Instead, they all turned to look at Enlin. The great Empress wore a blue muslin dress, accentuating her lithe and graceful figure. She bowed deeply to Enlin with an apologetic expression on her face. I'm truly sorry for everything that I've done to you in the past. If you have any grievances that you haven't vented, you can come and find me after this tribulation is over. Meng Ji was also looking at Lin with a complex expression. Ever since the battle at the Vermilion Bird Sect, Lin had foiled her plans over and over again, and he had even used lightning to detonate her clothes. During the battle at the opposite shore realm, Lin had helped her battle the ghost tried mighty figure, and she had also helped Lin escape from the Great Empress. The two of them had interacted quite a bit. They had been enemies before, but they had also been temporary allies. Who would have thought that the man before her would progress so quickly? He had already become the hope that could save the entire Snow Maiden tribe. Lin turned to the Great Empress and nodded. I'll deal with you in the future, but I hope that you can all complete the Tao Heart vow as soon as possible. Just submitting to the higher-ups of the Snow Maidens wasn't enough. He needed the entire Snow Maiden tribe to swear a vow that they would never harm the human race again. Only then would he be able to help the Snow Maidens without any worries. All right, I'll do that right away. The Great Empress agreed without any hesitation. There were over 100 million Snow Maidens, but the Great Empress could quickly relay instructions to the Snow Maidens and complete the vow in half a day. The Celestial Arch was responsible for overseeing the vow of the Snow Maidens, so Lin didn't participate. Instead, he toured the Snow Maiden's temporary residence with Shangguan Yi before taking a stroll around the treasure vault. Lin wasn't going to be so thirsty. He was just going to take a stroll along the way. That's right, he was going to take a stroll along the way. All of the Snow Maidens lived in ice houses, and even the Imperial Palace was carved out of ice. It was extremely intricate and beautiful, and Lin felt as if he were walking through a world of ice and snow. There were all types of intricate ice sculptures, and not only were they extremely beautiful, they were also very creative. We Snow Maidens are the best at building houses. All of the houses here were built by us. Look at that palace over there, it took me 10 days to carve it out. That's where I live. Shangguan Yi pointed to a pristine palace with a smile on her face as she led Lin onward. At this moment, she was much less intimidating, and she was much more approachable. Lin felt as if he had returned to the Vermilion Bird trial grounds to farm monsters with her. All of the houses here are made of ice. Don't you feel cold living here? Lin asked. No, it's more comfortable when it's cool. Our constitutions are all like this. Feel our hands if you don't believe me. Shangguan Yi extended a slender arm toward Lin. Lin squeezed her hand to find that it was soft and smooth, but also a little cold. It was a very pleasant sensation to the touch. Snow Maidens are very cold by nature, so we like to live in ice houses, Shangguan Yi explained. Lin's understanding of the Snow Maidens deepened once again. They continued onward until they arrived at the Imperial Palace. Lin possessed the highest level of authority among the Snow Maidens, and he could go wherever he wanted. He could openly enter the Imperial Palace and observe the palace. To his surprise, the Great Empress' living quarters were not as extravagant as he had imagined. Everything was very simple. The floor was smooth, and there were simple ice decorations. The only thing worth paying attention to was the ice paintings on the walls. The paintings seemed to be depicting the story of the Ice Matriarch. The Ice Matriarch in the painting was peerless, regal, and cold, and she bore a slight resemblance to Shangguan Yi. Shangguan Yi stared at the woman in the painting with a slightly entranced expression, and she seemed to be thinking of something. Lin and Shangguan Yi wandered around before finally arriving at the treasure vault of the Snow Maidens. What a coincidence, the treasure vault. I'm a little curious to see what's in there, Lin said. This is where we Snow Maidens store our treasures. I'll take you there, and you can take whatever you like. Shangguan Yi smiled without any hesitation. All right, let's go have a look. Lin repressed the excitement in his heart and pushed open the door. Chapter 1433. Shangguan Yi opened the restriction, and Lin eagerly pushed open the heavy door. A burst of dazzling light appeared, and Enlin's heart swayed slightly. Enlin was instantly astonished by the sight of the treasures behind the door. Did I open the door the wrong way? Should I close the door first before opening it again? Enlin muttered to himself. The wealth of the Snow Maidens had left him in awe and awe. It wasn't that there was too much, it was that there was too King little. There were only over 100 spirit pills and spirit plants scattered around, as well as a few dozen spirit tools. There were only 3 immortal rank pills and 2 immortal tools, and the rest were all miscellaneous items. Even spirit stones were only around 20 million, which wasn't even a fraction of the spirit stones in Enlin's storage ring. Enlin did a rough calculation of the value of the treasures in the treasure vault to find that it was roughly equivalent to the combined wealth of a few Return to Void stage mighty figures, or 1 or 2 Dragon Tribe mighty figures at the Return to Void pinnacle stage. One had to realize that this was the combined wealth of the entire Snow Maiden race. How could this be possible? Enlin stared at Shangguan Yi with incredulity on his face. An awkward expression appeared on Shangguan Yi's face. Do you think it's too little? What do you think? Enlin's expression darkened. You're a first-rate power with a Dao integration stage super mighty figure among your ranks, so how could your treasure vault be so shabby? A wry smile appeared on Shangguan Yi's face. The place where we Snow Maidens live is quite barren in terms of cultivation resources, so there's naturally nothing good here. Furthermore, the climate in the holy glacial lands has been drastically changing recently, and we have no home to return to, so we've been forced to venture toward the opposite shore realm, only to be evicted by the ghost tribe of the opposite shore realm. Whenever war breaks out between tribes, resources such as pills and weapons will be expended at a rapid rate, so these are the only things we have left. Shangguan Yi pointed at the treasures before her with a smile. There aren't many treasures here, but we can give them all to you. If you take all of these, they should still be worth some money, right? Just take them as a token of our appreciation. Before Enlin even had a chance to say anything, Shangguan Yi offered to give all of these treasures to him. She was like a homeless and destitute girl who handed him the only piece of bread she had with a smile. To be honest, Tycoon and didn't care about the bread, so he rejected it. I already said that I'm here to visit. What kind of person do you think I am? Enlin snorted coldly. Do you think I'm the kind of person who would be tempted by money? Shangguan Yi faltered slightly upon hearing this. Was the scammer who had sold the frying pan to her for 1,000 spirit stones per piece of meat really not that kind of person? Let's go. Enlin took the initiative to leave the treasure house. He really had no interest in plundering such a poor and shabby treasure house again. Shangguan Yi followed along behind Enlin with a smile on her face as she looked at him. The two of them walked around the Snow Maiden's temporary residence, and all of the Snow Maidens were extremely respectful toward Enlin and Shangguan Yi. This was the first time that Enlin had been treated so passionately by a Snow Maiden. In his mind, all of the Snow Maidens were icy beauties who were extremely disgusted by men and would freeze them into ice sculptures at the drop of a hat. However, as a grown man, he felt as if he were strolling through a brothel as he strolled through the core area of the Snow Maidens. All of the Snow Maidens were extremely enthusiastic, singing, dancing, and even serving him tea and fruits, as if they were afraid that they would upset Enlin if they didn't do a good job. If all of you were this adorable in the past, then the people of the Kingdom of the 9 States wouldn't despise you so much. Enlin couldn't help but sigh. That's because you were able to save them. That's why they're so adorable. Shangguan Yi immediately shattered Enlin's fantasies. The two of them arrived at the weapon forging bench, where a man was chatting happily with Meng Ji. This was the first time that Enlin had seen a man among the Snow Maidens, and it was an extremely handsome man at that. Enlin recognized this man. Back at the 10,000 Spirits Immortal sect, Meng Ji had personally led a large group of people to rescue this man. At the time, he was still a newbie and was completely unable to influence the outcome of that battle. Apparently, this man was a crossdresser who had disguised himself as a female in the Snow tribe for many years without being discovered. Now, he could finally appear here as a man. Unlin sighed with emotion in his heart. The man immediately bowed respectfully at the sight of Unlin. Chun Qinghang pays his respects to sect leader Unlin. That's right, this man was once an exceptional prodigy of the 10,000 Spirits Immortal sect, Chun Qinghang. Unlin listened to Chun Qinghang's introduction, and his other name surfaced in his mind, Bing Fu. How could a crossdresser not have a beautiful female name? Mr. Chun Qinghang, are you used to living here? A concerned smile appeared on Unlin's face, as if he were a senior. Chun Qinghang nodded with a serious expression. It's a blessing to be able to be with someone I like, so of course I'm used to it. Meng Ji blushed involuntarily upon hearing this. Chun Qinghang continued, I've been promoting the Kingdom of the Nine States to the Snow Maidens for the past few years so that they won't be so hostile toward the Kingdom of the Nine States, and I've already achieved some results. It's all right now. They've all vowed not to harm any humans in the Kingdom of the Nine States, so the Snow Maidens are no longer a threat to the Kingdom of the Nine States. Unlin smiled. Chun Qinghang, isn't it a little hurtful to deny the results of my ideological work with just one sentence? Unlin was a little dazed. In the past, he had to look up to Chun Qinghang, and he felt that Chun Qinghang and Meng Ji were a legendary couple. But now, he could earn Chun Qinghang's negative emotions without any scruples. After that, Unlin offered some words of consolation to Chun Qinghang before departing to continue his tour. Time slowly passed by. Unlin was a little tired, so he and Shangguan Yi went to a secluded courtyard to drink some iced tea. The iced tea here was not iced red tea. Instead, it was a type of tea unique to the Snow Maidens. It was as pristine white as snow and resembled a willow leaf. Wisps of blue tea mist would rise up from the tea as soon as it was soaked in hot water, creating an extremely beautiful sight to behold. This was clearly a tea brewed with hot water, but it was so refreshing that one shuddered after taking a sip. It was as if one could expel all of the heat from one's body with just a single exhale. Shangguan Yi was enjoying the tea with gusto, but Unlin was trembling uncontrollably. The Snow Maidens liked the cold, but Unlin didn't like it. However, drinking this kind of tea gave him a different kind of refreshing feeling, so he didn't mind it. 2 hours later, the Great Empress, the Celestial Dharch, and High Priestess Meng Ji appeared before Unlin again. The Celestial Dharch spoke first. All of the Snow Maidens have sworn their vows through my omniscient eye. You can begin the next step of your plan. Unlin heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing this before turning to Shangguan Yi. Let me see your death timer. I'll see if I can undo it for you. Chapter 1434. Undoing the death timer? Both the Great Empress and the High Priestess were extremely excited to hear this. Shangguan Yi's expression became even more vibrant as hope reignited in her eyes. If Unlin really did have the ability to undo the spell technique, then the Snow Maidens would be able to avoid extinction. At this moment, the Celestial Dharch stepped forward. Unlin, there's something I want you to understand. Once you have the ability to dispel this death countdown, the enemy will be able to sense it, and there's a very good chance that it will be able to track you down. Unlin chuckled. That's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm just worried that it won't come. Otherwise, I'll have to dispel the death countdowns of over 100 million Snow Maidens one by one, and I'll definitely be unable to do so in 10 days. The Celestial Dharch didn't say anything else. He knew that Unlin was planning to kill that mysterious living being from the very beginning. If that living being really was a manifestation of a representative of the heavenly Tao, then this was actually the best choice for him. At the very least, all representatives of the heavenly Tao that had appeared were extremely hostile toward the human race. Seeing as that was the case, it was Unlin's job to kill them while they were still restricted by the great Tao of heaven and earth. This battle wasn't for the Snow Maidens. If it weren't for the fact that he had to protect his family and friends, as well as the human race, and Lin definitely wouldn't take this risk. The celestial Dharch stared at the white-robed young man with a slightly dazed expression. As the #1 paramount power in the Kingdom of the Nine States, the Celestial Court enjoyed supreme prestige among the human race. If the human race was in trouble, the Celestial Court would be the first power to step forward. As the war god of the Celestial Court, Lin was worthy of his title as the war god of the Celestial Court. Not only was the war god of the Celestial Court the most powerful warrior in the Celestial Court aside from the 5 emperors, but he also had to understand what responsibility was and why he was fighting. It was quite clear that Lin had fulfilled both of these requirements. The humans of the Kingdom of the Nine States were either cultivating, pursuing fame and fortune, living in peace and contentment, or laughing about the 4-9 immortal sect's meteoric rise. However, no one knew that the person that everyone had been talking about recently was now silently shouldering the heavy responsibility of protecting the human race. He stood at the forefront of the human race, facing battles that might very well cost him his life. With that in mind, the celestial Dharch relaxed, and a smile appeared on his face. Lin, go ahead and do what you need to do. I'll stand guard for you. Lin nodded with a solemn expression before standing in front of Shangguan Yi. What do you need me to do? Shangguan Yi was a little nervous. My divine sense will enter your mind. Don't resist. Lin pressed his hand against Shangguan Yi's forehead. Shangguan Yi closed her eyes, and her eyelashes trembled lightly. Lin could feel a cool yet delicate sensation on his hand, and at the same time, his divine sense had already entered Shangguan Yi's mind. The death timer was extremely glaring in her mind, and it was ticking away 1 second at a time. There was a projection of a skeleton around the timer, and he could sense an extremely terrifying aura of death emanating from the skeleton. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that anyone who slept with this skull on their head would have nightmares at night. However, the Snow Maidens were still able to remain so calm even with such a thing in their minds. It had to be said that they were quite mentally stable. Perhaps it was because they had been through enough hardships in the past. Lin set aside his distracting thoughts before extending his divine sense toward the death timer. However, just as his divine sense was about to make contact with the death timer, it was suddenly cut off by an invisible barrier. No matter how hard he tried, he was unable to penetrate the barrier, as if it were the will of the heavens that could keep all powers in this world at bay. Interesting. No wonder you said that this is the same type of living being as the heavenly wind god. This isn't a power that should exist in this world. Lin chuckled lightly. Suddenly, a divine halo of wind appeared above his head, and a divine aura that stood proudly above the 9 heavens spread out. It was supreme and supreme, looking down on all living things. Regardless of whether it was the celestial Dharch of the Celestial Court or the great Empress and High Priestess of the Snow Maidens, all of their expressions shifted drastically. All of them could sense an irresistible power emanating from the death timer. This power. He's using the power of the heavenly wind god? The celestial Dharch murmured to himself. As expected, Lin is the hope of our tribe. The beautiful eyes of the Empress stared at the man in front of her. Her pure and flawless face was flushed with excitement. Lin finally used his heavenly wind power again. He imbued his heavenly wind power into his divine sense, and he used the power of wind as a saber to strike the death timer. Sweat began to appear on Shangguan Yi's forehead, and her features paled slightly. She was clearly struggling to handle the power of Lin's wind power, even though it wasn't targeted at her. The saber of wind power fell upon the invisible barrier and slowly tore it apart. Lin's expression stirred upon seeing this. It really did work. The representatives of the heavenly Tao could interfere with one another. He didn't hesitate any longer. After slicing open the barrier, his powerful divine sense instantly destroyed the death timer and the projection of the skeleton in Shangguan Yi's mind. Boom! Shangguan Yi let loose a pained moan, and a cloud of black mist erupted from her body before disappearing into thin air. Her intricate features were a little pale, but her golden eyes opened at this moment as a relaxed smile appeared on her face. "I did it!" The great Empress and the High Priestess were both ecstatic to hear this. The celestial Thearcha's expression also eased slightly. The fact that Enlin was able to break through his opponent's power meant that he had the power to battle that mysterious living being. "Thank you, sect leader Enlin, for saving our snow maidens from extinction." The great Empress extended another grateful salute. "I haven't even defeated that mysterious living being yet, so why are you thanking me so soon?" Enlin smiled. "If you can save our ice matriarch, then even if everyone else dies, our snow maidens won't truly perish," the great Empress replied with a serious expression. It looked like the snow maiden entourage had already reported Shangguan Yi's identity to the great Empress. Otherwise, the great Empress wouldn't have revealed Shangguan Yi's identity so easily. The great Empress gripped the air with one hand, and a smooth barrier of ice enshrouded the entire sky. Her voice spread throughout the entire Snow Maiden territory at this moment. "The enemy is upon us. Everyone, prepare for battle." The formation was activated. The Snow Maidens were led by the 13 Return to Void stage Holy Palace leaders into the sky before forming a battle formation and keeping a close eye on their surroundings. "Come on, let's continue to break the death timer." Enlin was afraid that his opponent wouldn't come, so he decided to continue to provoke her. Breaking through her spell technique was the best way to provoke her. The great Empress and Meng Ji looked at each other before standing in front of Enlin. Enlin placed one hand on the great Empress' forehead and the other on High Priestess Meng Ji's forehead. Chapter 1435. His divine sense erupted forth with the paramount power of wind and instantly sliced through the barrier. At the same time, Enlin's divine sense also destroyed the power that had been planted in the great Empress and Meng Ji's minds, leaving not a single trace behind. The great Empress opened her eyes with astonishment on her face. "What a miraculous power!" "Sect leader Enlin, she forced herself to stop halfway through her sentence. Everyone had their own secrets, and it wasn't a good idea to pry into someone else's secrets. The great Empress felt like this man was very mysterious, and she really wanted to get closer to him. Enlin smiled at the great Empress as if he hadn't heard what she had just said. "Summon a few more snow maidens. I don't believe that it won't come." The great Empress immediately summoned a few more Holy Palace leaders. Enlin saw a few familiar faces among these snow maidens. For example, Su Jingxiang, Yan Hua, and Ro Gu. They were all returned to Void Stage snow maidens that Enlin had met in the ancient Tai Chu realm. Enlin had been influenced by the Holy Mother's heart at the time, and he had saved them once. Su Jingxiang, Yan Hua, and Ro Gu were all feeling extremely conflicted at this moment. They had been saved by Enlin again. "Thank you, Enlin," Su Jingxiang said in a gentle voice as she looked at Enlin. Yan Hua pursed her lips. I have nothing to repay you with. I can only," Enlin immediately interjected, "don't repay me with your body." Yan Hua choked on her words, and she glowered at Enlin. "I'll repay you in my next life." Enlin heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing this. In all honesty, even though the snow maidens were very beautiful, they were too cold to hug. He wouldn't want them even if they offered themselves to him. He began to remove the death timer on Yan Hua and the others. The spell technique that the enemy had left on the snow maidens wasn't very powerful, and it could be easily broken by his heavenly wind power. The enemy probably didn't anticipate that the snow maidens would be able to use a similar power. It was also for this reason that Enlin was able to use the power of the heavenly wind god many times. However, he wasn't going to tire himself out. After saving one or two snow maidens, he rested for a while and swallowed a spirit pill to replenish his energy. The snow maidens' eyes widened at the sight of Enlin eating the spirit pill like it was candy. They really couldn't imagine the life of the rich. After a series of ferocious actions, the death countdowns of all the sacred palace masters were broken by Enlin. All of them expressed their gratitude toward Enlin, and their favorability level increased by leaps and bounds. And Lin thought to himself, if the system issued a mission for him to gain the affection of the Snow Maidens, he should be able to complete it immediately. Sigh, we've already deactivated a dozen or so death countdowns, but they still haven't arrived? And Lin swallowed a spirit pill and sighed in resignation. He still couldn't think of any way to uncover the culprit behind the scenes. He could only wait for the culprit to come out. However, the other party seemed to be able to keep his composure and had yet to show himself. Deactivating the death countdowns of the Snow Maidens one by one wasn't a solution either. There were over 100 million Snow Maidens, and Lin would be exhausted to death if he had to deal with them one by one. However, there didn't seem to be any other way. Looks like this is an intelligent and cautious heavenly god manifestation, and Lin recalled the heavenly gods he had seen before. The heavenly god of sea chose to hide, the heavenly god of wind chose to be reckless, and the heavenly god of lightning chose to seduce others. Now, this unknown heavenly god was hiding like a teenage mutant ninja turtle. What could he do to provoke this heavenly god manifestation and make it come out? And Lin fell into deep thought. He called over another Snow Maiden and decided to study that barrier. And Lin's divine sense enshrouded the death countdowns as he used the power of the heavenly wind god to slowly slice open that barrier. He wasn't in a hurry to destroy that power. Instead, he enshrouded it with the power of the wind and carefully sensed its power before gently stirring it to tease it. The Snow Maiden's eyelashes trembled as she moaned, and Lin's brows furrowed slightly. The Celestial Dharch, the Great Empress, and the others all wore expressions of anticipation and curiosity. And Lin suddenly discovered that if he attached a wind blade to his divine sense and slowly tore open the barrier, the power of the wind and the power of the barrier would either fuse or repel one another. This was a state where the two powers fused and repelled one another at the same time. It was very contradictory, but it was like the yin-yang symbol, mutually reinforcing and mutually annihilating one another. He tried to push the power in the direction of fusion. Not only did Lin want to destroy that power, but he also wanted to absorb it as well. This was a process that was progressing very slowly. However, just as he was about to fuse that power with it, it was suddenly met with an extremely violent rejection. And Lin's expression darkened, but at the same time, he became even more excited. It was good that there was resistance and rejection. He was just worried that it wouldn't react at all. The more it struggled, the more excited Lin became. The more he wanted to fuse with it. The most provocative thing he could do to that mysterious living being wasn't to destroy its spell technique. Instead, it was to fuse with and absorb its power. That would be the equivalent of rubbing its power against the ground, and no one would be able to tolerate that. Now, he could only hope that this living being manifested by the heavenly gods would have its own emotions. Only then would Lin be able to do anything meaningful. And Lin exerted all of his strength and finally managed to absorb his opponent's power. An ancient and indestructible aura flowed into his body along with the power of the wind. This power. And Lin's heart was throbbing with excitement. For some reason, he felt like this power was even more terrifying than that of the heavenly wind god. They were both representatives of the heavenly Tao, so why was he feeling like this? Whoosh! All of a sudden, the clouds in the sky lit up with a golden light. A burst of mighty power tore through the massive ice barrier unleashed by the Great Empress before descending from the sky. And Lin, look out! The Celestial Dharch let loose a cry of surprise. He could sense that this power was hurtling toward Lin. And Lin's expression was completely unfazed as his divine tool, evil-slaying sword, flew out from behind him and slashed toward the mighty power. A black light engulfed heaven and earth as an extremely profound sword projection tore through the power. The energy that had been split in two fell onto the ground, causing the hard ground to melt like butter. It created two cracks that were hundreds of miles long and were so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. The great Empress' heart jolted with shock. If this power were to fall upon her, there was no way she would be able to defend herself. This was because this power was imbued with some kind of irresistible power, as if the two of them weren't even on the same level. A terrifying aura descended from the sky, as if a paramount god had descended upon this world. Many of the Snow Maidens raised their heads with expressions of shock and horror on their faces. All of the Snow Maidens in the sky turned pale with fright at the sight of this aura. At this moment, a white figure rose into the sky. All of the Snow Maidens felt an indescribable sense of security at the sight of the white figure, and their expressions of shock and horror faded significantly as they stared at the white figure with scorching light in their eyes. They knew that if there was anyone in this world who could contend with a god in the sky, then it had to be this man. He was the war god of the Celestial Court, the sect leader of the 4-9 Immortal sect, Unlin. Chapter 1436. Unlin looked up at the incessant rumbling in the sky. Boundless divine might descended from above, crushing down upon all living beings. However, this divine might didn't affect him in the slightest. Ever since he mastered the great divine might technique, no one dared to flex in front of him anymore. The clouds parted. A golden figure appeared in front of everyone. Her entire body was enshrouded in golden divine light, and she had the appearance of an extremely beautiful snow maiden. However, her body was semi-transparent, as if she were the most perfect piece of jade. The most eye-catching feature was the divine halo above her head. Golden light swirled incessantly, and it was so fast that Unlin couldn't even catch a glimpse of it. If it weren't for the ripples around him, he wouldn't even have known that the divine halo could revolve. Unlin sensed a familiar power from the divine halo. It was of a different element, but its essence was the same. This was undoubtedly another living being that had manifested from a heavenly god. However, he didn't know what kind of heavenly god this was. Just as Unlin was feeling perplexed, the living being turned toward Unlin, and a peculiar light suddenly appeared in its emotionless eyes. "You're the one who absorbed my power? What happened? Why are the wind and lightning in your hands?" The mysterious living being was both excited and perplexed. Unlin blinked before replying. "They've acknowledged me and decided to bestow their heavenly god powers upon me." This living being was quite expressive. Perhaps he could have a good chat with her? Sure enough, the golden snow maiden fell silent, as if she were thinking about something. Moments later, the divine halo above her head suddenly glowed brightly before emitting a buzzing sound. She tapped the divine halo above her head with a shiny, golden finger. An ethereal and holy voice sounded, "Hey Time, what's up? Light, I'm at the border of the Tai Chu opposite shore realm. I discovered that someone has stolen the wind and lightning, so I came to report this to you. I wanted to kill him on the spot. What do you think?" The Golden Snow Maiden asked. A voice sounded from within the divine halo, "He must die." Golden Snow Maiden, got it. Unlin, I haven't even tried to fool you yet, and you're already giving me a death sentence? Say a few words to me first. However, time and light, could it be that they were the power represented by authority? Unlin suddenly panicked. The Tao of Light and the Tao of Time were extremely mysterious. Even among the various major powers, there were very few who could come into contact with this level of power. To think that the other party's authority was of such an attribute. It sounded like he wasn't someone to be trifled with. He could sense the killing intent radiating from the Golden Snow Maiden, and he immediately said, "Time, do you know why the wind and lightning have voluntarily allowed me to inherit their powers?" The Golden Snow Maiden remained expressionless, and it was as if she hadn't heard him at all. She formed a sword with one hand and slashed it toward Unlin. 10-year sword. The void fluctuated, and a golden sword pierced through the sky. The corners of Unlin's mouth twitched slightly, and he finally gave up on trying to bluff his way through. Instead, he raised his aura to its peak and activated origin energy of the netherworld, fire god mode, star vein divine blast, and triple body burst at the same time. He was able to feel the vicissitudes of time from the blade of the sword. That power had passed through the river of time and ceaselessly accumulated sword momentum. In the end, merely the sword chi that was emitted possessed the might to split mountains and split seas. The great Empress' expression shifted drastically, and she immediately yelled, "Get into formation and protect yourselves!" Countless blue defensive barriers and spell formations began to appear. At this moment, the Golden Snow Maiden's 10-year sword had already descended. Unlin's expression remained calm, and he was just about to raise his evil-slaying sword to defend himself. However, the sword of light suddenly flashed past at a speed that was as fast as the speed of light. There was no earth-shattering explosion as he had imagined. The Golden Snow Maiden, or in other words, the Heavenly Time God. Her sword strike was extremely terrifying, but it was as if it had never even appeared in the first place. All of the Snow Maidens were dumbstruck, and they didn't know what had happened. However, Unlin's pupils contracted. His internal organs were rapidly deteriorating, and the vitality of every single cell in his body was rapidly diminishing to the point where they were even dying. He understood now. He knew what the death timer that had appeared on the Snow Maiden's body meant. That wasn't the power of death. Instead, it was the power of time. Time was used to end a living being's life. Through the implantation of a time seed, the target would immediately age and die as if they had lived for countless years. As long as the target hadn't transcended beyond all things, they wouldn't be able to escape the power of time. Unlin stared at the changes taking place within his body with shock and horror on his face. If it weren't for his extremely powerful life force, that sword strike would have most likely already killed him. He wasn't the only one who was astonished. The Heavenly Time God was also staring at Unlin with astonishment and confusion on her face. Strange, why has my power been restricted so much? Why is it that your life force hasn't diminished in the slightest? It's as if it's been locked down. Unlin didn't know what she was talking about, and he gritted his teeth before pouncing toward the Heavenly Time God. The Heavenly Time God had severely wounded him with just one attack. He had to end this battle as quickly as possible. Otherwise, he would be exhausted to death sooner or later. The Heavenly Time God heaved a faint sigh at the sight of Unlin. As expected, my power has been restricted far too drastically. If this were in the past, I would be able to determine life and death with a single glance. As she spoke, she stretched out her golden and slender palm and clenched it in the air. Time stopped. All of a sudden, heaven and earth fell silent. Everything in this world fell silent. Regardless of whether it was the Snow Maidens, the celestial Dharch, the plants and trees, the wind and clouds in the sky. Everything was as still as a painting. Only the Heavenly Time God was still standing proudly in the heavens, exuding boundless divine light. Her eyes seemed to have seen through the passage of time. Regardless of whether they are powerful or weak, they are all as insignificant as dust particles in my eyes. In the face of time, everything in this world was insignificant. However, in the next instant, the man before her was still charging toward her. The man was completely out of place in this frozen world, but he was extremely similar to her. The silver-white flowing wind divine ring released a divine radiance above his head, and a protective barrier that isolated all power covered his entire body. A supreme aura spread out. The man who had sprang into action was none other than Unlin. After enduring the Heavenly Time God's 10-year sword, he knew that it would be difficult to defeat the Heavenly Time God in this world, so he immediately unleashed his heavenly wind power to enshroud his entire body. It was exactly because of this that he was able to evade the Heavenly Time God's technique. Heavenly Blade. Unlin hurtled toward the Heavenly Time God like a flaming meteor, appearing before her in the blink of an eye as his evil-slaying sword, which was imbued with the heavenly wind power, slashed down. The Heavenly Time God was momentarily dazed by the oncoming Unlin, but during this split second of distraction, Unlin's heavenly blade had already sliced her body in half. Chapter 1437. The blade projection sliced through the heavens and sliced through yin and yang. Heaven and earth, regardless of whether it was the heavenly time god or the earth, were all sliced in half. The still time suddenly began to flow again. Everyone was then greeted by the sight of Enlil slicing the heavenly time god in half. My God, what's going on? Did sect leader Enlil teleport? Great, he actually killed his opponent in one move. Our clan is saved. All of the snow maidens looked up at the battle in the sky with shock and awe in their eyes. However, the celestial Dharch and the great Empress brows furrowed slightly upon seeing this. They felt like something was missing. Enlil was also very tense. He was just about to unleash a few dozen more sword strikes. A voice suddenly sounded. Time reversal. The two halves of the golden snow maiden that had been sliced in half suddenly began to merge back together as if they were being rewound. Then, the wound quickly healed, and her body became whole again. Enlin's heart jolted upon seeing this. He had finally unleashed his heavenly wind technique, but time reversal just like that? If time was reversed, then give me back the power I expended. Enlil discovered that this time reversal only affected herself and couldn't affect the outside world. However, this was already insane enough. He had finally slain the heavenly time god, only for her to return to her original state. How was he supposed to kill her then? Even though he said that, Enlil still continued to charge forward. He could only take a gamble. The heavenly time god had to expend a lot of power to reverse time, and that power couldn't be reversed. The heavenly time god spoke in an indifferent voice. As expected, you can still use the wind. Danger level, heaven rank. You must be eliminated. Heavenly blade. Enlil unleashed another sword strike. The heavenly time god extended a palm toward Enlil. Slow down. Whoosh! Enlil suddenly discovered that the speed at which he swung his sword had slowed down by 100-fold. Furthermore, at the same time, he felt like this was the speed that he was supposed to achieve after unleashing his full power. At this moment, the heavenly time god gripped the air, and a golden sword projection pierced through heaven and earth like a golden river surging through the heavens with no end in sight. This was an endless river of time. No one knew where it came from, and no one knew where it would end. Drown in the ancient river of time, 100-year sword. The heavenly time god slashed her golden river toward Enlil, and the river surged through the air even faster than Enlil's sword. Move it! Move! Enlil had clearly used his power of wind to protect himself, but the power of time was omnipresent, and it was violently suppressing his wall of wind before disintegrating it. This was just like how Enlil had used the power of wind to slice through the heavenly time god's protective barrier. Now, the roles had been reversed, and Enlil was the one being crushed. Speed, I need speed now. Enlil took a deep breath, and the flowing wind divine ring above his head suddenly changed. Thunder rumbled, and a golden light frightened the soul. An explosive, swift, and supreme aura spread out. Stage Lightning Essence Cultivation Method. Lightning Essence Cultivation Method. Paramount golden void lightning revolved around Enlin's body, and he tore through the omnipresent power of time with extremely violent force. He was using the power of lightning that he had obtained from the refined golden void lightning. Lightning was the embodiment of speed and violence, so there was a chance that it could break through the heavenly time god's power of time in a short time. Enlin's speed increased explosively once again as the golden river surged toward him. His body flashed like lightning as he dodged in another direction, narrowly evading the golden river by a hair's breadth. Golden void divine lightning. Enlil pointed a finger, and golden divine lightning tore through space before roaring through the air. The golden void divine lightning was as thick as a water bucket, and just one bolt was enough to light up the entire heavens, as if it were the only bolt of paramount lightning between heaven and earth. Time decay. The heavenly time god extended a hand toward the divine lightning, and a golden ball of light appeared in her palm, which exuded an ancient might as well as an indescribable sense of sorrow. The golden void divine lightning pierced into the golden ball of light. It was also in that instant that the golden void divine lightning seemed to have experienced countless years within the golden ball of light, and its power became weaker and weaker. Even the tiniest particle had a period of decay and annihilation. The heavenly time god had created a space to rapidly decay the golden void divine lightning. Unlin's expression shifted drastically, and he immediately unleashed all of the power of lightning in an attempt to break through the heavenly time god's defenses. Break through! Unlin let loose an almighty roar as his golden void lightning ring quickly revolved. His power of lightning was imbued with paramount power of laws as it surged toward the heavenly time god's ball of light. Finally, the golden void divine lightning pierced through the time decay ball of light at Unlin's behest. However, the golden void divine lightning had already shrunk from the size of a water bucket to the size of a mudfish. Crack! Boom! The golden void divine lightning exploded in the heavenly time god's hand, and her palm cracked slightly. The heavenly time god cocked her head to the side, and a beautiful smile appeared on her flawless features. Time reversal! A buzzing sound erupted. Her hand was instantly restored to its original state. Unlin almost threw up a mouthful of blood upon seeing this. Was this necessary? Was this King necessary? If she had used the time reversal technique just a little later, the wound would have healed by itself. Even so, why did she still want to use the time reversal technique? Did she really have to let him know that she could use the time reversal technique as she pleased? Unlin was completely flabbergasted upon seeing this. He was clearly risking his life, but why was his opponent's reaction so casual? It was also at this moment that the heavenly time god's 100-year sword suddenly changed direction and pounced toward Unlin from behind. Again, Unlin's expression shifted, and he was just about to unleash a lightning technique to escape. At this moment, something unexpected occurred. The river of time that stretched across the sky suddenly split and condensed into 10 golden flying swords. Unlin could sense the passage of time within the flying sword. It was extremely fearsome, and it was imbued with an indescribable power of time. There are 10 10-year swords? Unlin was astonished. Could a technique be split up like this? The 100-year sword isn't fast enough, so you'll have a chance to evade. What if it splits up into 10 10-year swords and attacks you at the same time? The heavenly time god waved a hand through the air. The golden flying swords flew toward Unlin at an incredible speed. In the sky above, 10 golden sword projections instantly pierced through space. Looking up from below, one could only see a series of golden sword projections in the sky. As for the swords themselves, none of the snow maidens or the celestial Dharch or the great empress were able to see them as they were simply too fast. Divine lightning revolved around Unlin's body, and his speed rose to the maximum as he evaded the flying swords. Only lightning could keep up with the speed of light. I'll hide. Dodge. Unlin was still slightly inferior in the end, and one of the 10 light swords still struck his body. Chapter 1438. The 10-year sword pierced through the golden lightning before puncturing Unlin's body. The extremely peculiar power of time caused his body to age at a rapid rate. White hair appeared on his head, and his organs and bones were also beginning to decay. Unlin's body swayed slightly, and he threw up a mouthful of blood, as if he was struggling to hold on. The heavenly time god slowly drifted toward Unlin with a cold expression. As long as I kill you, the wind and lightning will return to heaven and earth. Even without their sentience, heaven and earth will become more complete. Unlin panted heavily. His body was in an extremely poor state, and the divine halo above his head gradually dimmed before finally beginning to crumble. After using the powers of the heavenly gods repeatedly, his powers of the heavenly gods had finally been completely depleted. Without the powers of wind and lightning, there was no way he could contend with the heavenly time god. Little Xie, and Lin suddenly roared. Boom! An inky black domain instantly proliferated, enshrouding heaven and earth within a radius of over 50 kilometers. The heavenly time god was suddenly plunged into complete darkness, and she was unable to tell which direction was up or down. This is... Her expression changed again as she stared at the scenes unfolding before her with an entranced expression. Evil sword technique, final technique, eternal night. Lin unleashed a dark, formless sword strike. The power to end all things surged toward the heavenly time god. The evil-slaying sword possessed a special type of power. Even when Lin didn't possess any powers of the heavenly gods, it could still affect the heavenly wind god. Hence, Little Xie was Lin's final trump card. Within the divine tool domain, the heavenly time god's golden light was extremely dazzling. Her expression shifted slightly upon sensing the arrival of the eternal night, but there was still no hint of fear on her face. The heavenly time god stepped lightly into the darkness with her golden foot, and the power of time and space instantly transformed into a halo of light that proliferated into infinity and beyond like a ripple. Time decay. Regardless of whether it was the eternal night sword strike or the divine tool domain, both were instantly annihilated. It was as if the night had been torn apart by the light. Heaven and earth reappeared. The heavenly time god could see that the evil-slaying sword in Lin's hand was still glowing with a peculiar black light. Her pupils contracted slightly, and she was just about to raise her hand. Bam! She was caught off guard. The heavenly time god's head exploded. This scene happened so suddenly that everyone jumped in fright. All of the snow maidens let loose cries of surprise before expressions of undisguised joy appeared on their faces. Some of them were blushing, while others were cheering loudly. Lin, on the other hand, was frowning deeply. He had just used Vanquish the Heavens and Slay All Evil's ultimate skill, Annihilation. Even though the heavenly time god's head was about to explode, she felt like something was missing. Little Xie's power was able to wound or exhaust her opponent, but she was unable to destroy her opponent's core. She was like a weed that could grow again after being burned to ashes, as expected. Even if his head exploded, a pleasant and emotionless voice rang out again. Time rewind. Time reverse. The light spots converged. As if rewinding, the exploded head began to reassemble itself. Both the Snow Maidens and the Celestial Larch were dumbstruck upon seeing this, and despair welled up in their hearts. Even if the Golden Snow Maiden was sliced in half and her head exploded, she wouldn't die even if she was severely wounded to this extent. She would be able to recover after a single time reversal, so what else could he do to kill her? What could he do? What else could he do to kill her? Lin racked his brain for a solution, but he still couldn't come up with a solution. He was already at the end of the line. Was he going to run? Lin recalled the promise he had made with Xiaolan. If he couldn't defeat her, he had to come back alive no matter what. He looked at the extremely powerful Golden Snow Maiden before him, and the thought of retreat gradually welled up in his heart. On the ground below, the Celestial Larch was dialing a voice transmission. Your Majesty, the situation is extremely urgent. The heavenly time god is here. If you don't come, Lin might really die. The Celestial Larch spoke in a panicked voice. Nuwa's sigh sounded from the other side of the voice transmission talisman. You know that I can't do anything in my current state. I only have one chance to attack the heavens. The Celestial Larch was a little reluctant to give up, but he knew that Nuwa was right. If Nuwa were to intervene now, her plan to mend the heavens would only fail. He gritted his teeth. I won't let Lin die here no matter what. Lin is the war god of the Celestial Court, and I am the Celestial Larch. If you can't do anything, then I'll save him. The other side of the voice transmission talisman fell silent. Celestial Larch. I hope you know what you're doing, Nuwa said with a serious expression. You can't even defeat the heavenly wind god, so how are you going to fight the heavenly time god? Our heaven-mending sect isn't researching how to fight the heavens. What we're researching is how to mend the flaws of the heavens. The celestial Dharch smiled. But I've already done my research. Nuwa. The celestial Dharch ended the voice transmission talisman and looked up into the sky. The heavenly time god had already used her time reversal technique to recover from all of her injuries. At this moment, even the snow maidens knew that Enlin was actually at a disadvantage. Even though Enlin had wounded her twice, she was able to recover both times. In contrast, Enlin's aura was beginning to wane after being struck twice by the 10-year sword, and his body was most likely also severely wounded in terms of trump cards. Enlin had already used up all of his trump cards, so he didn't have any more trump cards up his sleeve. As for the heavenly time god, she was a completely unfathomable being. No one knew what her next attack was going to be. Even if she continued to use the 10-year sword, she would be able to wear Enlin down. The great empress looked up at the man standing proudly in the sky and took a deep breath before speaking in a clear voice. All snow maidens, attack the enemy and create an opportunity for sect leader Enlin. Tens of thousands of snow maiden powerful beings roared in unison as they formed a battle formation and launched an all-out attack toward the heavenly time god. Their enemies were extremely powerful, to the point where they were unimaginably powerful, but they could only pin their hopes on the man in the sky. Hence, all of them launched fearless attacks in order to buy even a sliver of an opportunity for Enlin. All of a sudden, a torrential downpour of ice blades and frosty cannons rocked heaven and earth. Countless ice spell techniques inundated the heavenly time god like a tidal wave. Enlin faltered slightly at the sight of the snow maidens shielding him. He didn't think that he would be able to receive reinforcements from almost all of the snow maidens in this dire situation. However, these attacks were clearly completely ineffective. The golden ball of light proliferated for 5 kilometers, and all of the spell techniques that entered the range of the ball of light were quickly dispelled, leaving no trace behind. The heavenly time god stood at the center of the ball of light with a cold expression on her face, completely unfazed by the snow maiden's attacks. Enlin knew that this was the power of time decay. Not only would normal attacks not be able to break through it, but even the power of the heavenly gods could be obliterated by this power of time decay. Enlin was already planning to run away, but his heart wavered at the sight of the snow maidens desperately trying to create an opportunity for him. Should he run or not? Chapter 1439. If he escaped, over 100 million snow maidens were going to die here. The heavenly time god would also become a huge threat to the human race. However, if he didn't escape, how was Enlin going to kill this heavenly god? Just as he was at his wit's end, a voice suddenly sounded in his mind. Enlin, I am the celestial Dharch. I plan to help you fight the heavenly time god. Enlin's heart jolted upon hearing this, and he immediately transmitted his voice. You want to help me? How are you going to help me? You have to realize that the heavenly time god's time reversal can make all of our efforts go to waste. The celestial Thearcha's voice sounded again. Can you wound the heavenly time god again? Enlin thought about it for a moment before gritting his teeth. If I fight with my life on the line, I can cripple her again. As long as you can incapacitate her in an extremely short amount of time. As long as I can get close to her, I have a way to kill her. The celestial Dharch replied. Enlin was shocked. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Why are you waiting until I'm about to die? Is this more exciting? The celestial Dharch. No, it's because I need to analyze her power. Do you still remember when I fought the heavenly wind god? I have a special constitution that allows me to use the power of the heavens against it, but I was still inferior in the end. The reason for that was because my analysis wasn't complete enough. Enlin recalled that the celestial Dharch seemed to have blown up the Wind Walker once. The celestial Dharch continued, I can also use the power of the heavens to fight the heavenly time god. With my experience from last time against the heavenly wind god, as well as my complete analysis, I am confident that I can suppress or even kill the heavenly time god. And Lin couldn't help but become excited upon hearing this, and his battle intent surged again. "All right, I'll battle you again. Time reincarnation." The golden snow maiden tossed a golden ball into the sky, upon which it exploded. Golden light permeated heaven and earth before falling like arrows. Golden arrows instantly fell from the sky like torrential rain. Countless snow maidens were struck, and they wailed in anguish as their bodies quickly melted into puddles of snow. The snow maidens were born from the snow, and they were transformed from the snow. However, the golden arrow actually allowed them to return to their original state. It was like reincarnation. No one could defend themselves against the rain of golden swords. Even the return to void stage snow maidens were quickly reduced to a puddle of snow after being struck by the golden swords. Another instant kill. In the face of the heavenly time god, regardless of whether one was a Tao body stage cultivator or a return to void stage cultivator, they were all just ant. And Lin had only just concluded his conversation with the celestial Tharch, but tens of thousands of snow maidens had already perished. Only after battling the heavenly time god did the snow maidens truly realize just how terrifying she was. Their attacks couldn't even break through her defenses, but any of her attacks could insta-kill them. This was a power that could make people despair. If it weren't for the fact that the snow maidens knew that their savior, Lin, was still alive, their morale would have collapsed a long time ago. 9 Extreme Frost Sky Talisman. Mengji suddenly appeared beside the heavenly time god with a divine staff in her hand. She pointed her divine staff at the golden snow maidens, and there was an extremely dazzling and translucent divine symbol on the tip of the staff. The divine symbol continued to expand, and the power of extreme frost that permeated heaven and earth became more and more terrifying. It crashed down toward the heavenly time god with 9 layers of extremely powerful sealing power. The heavenly time god waved a hand casually, and a wisp of golden wind tore the 9 extreme frost sky talisman apart. Meng Ji's expression shifted drastically, and she hurriedly retreated, but her arm was still swept up by the golden wind. It was also at this moment that her delicate arm began to age at a rate discernible to the naked eye. A decisive expression appeared on Meng Ji's face as she materialized an ice sword and slashed it toward her own arm. Blood splattered through the air, and she was finally able to halt the aging process by severing her own arm. Right at this moment, the Snow Maiden Empress also charged toward the heavenly time god with a peculiar ice crystal in her hand. The crystal exuded a shimmering divine light and appeared to be extremely intricate and beautiful. This was the only divine tool of the Snow Maidens, the Frost Essence Spike. Once it struck an enemy, it would be able to inject the essential power of extreme frost into the enemy's body to seal them for eternity. Even Tao integration stage super mighty figures would not be able to escape this fate. The great Empress power of the divine Tao soared into the sky, encompassing the entire sky for 150 kilometers. In the extremely cold environment, she threw out the strange ice crystal in her hand. The ice crystal glowed with a colorful light, and all of its microscopic structures were constantly changing. It was analyzing its enemy's attributes in order to create the most suitable form to attack. Soon, the ice crystal began to shrink and elongate, like an extremely thin needle. Whoosh! The divine tool, the Frost Essence Ancestral Spike, stabbed toward the heavenly time god, leaving an extremely obscure trajectory in its wake. And Lin's eyes also opened at this moment, and his aura began to soar explosively. It was time for him to strike. The heavenly time god extended a translucent fingertip at the sight of the oncoming Frost Essence Spike. 10-year shield. A small golden shield began to appear on her fingertip. Just like that, the Frost Essence Ancestral Spike pierced into the small shield, and its speed suddenly slowed down by 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times. The spike that had been like a bolt of lightning was now crawling like a turtle, and then it was crawling like a snail. Time flowed differently within the shield compared to the outside world. At the same time, objects that had entered the shield also experienced different phenomena as compared to the outside world. This interference and conflict had resulted in this peculiar change. At this moment, the heavenly time god pointed her other finger at the great Empress. An extremely powerful sense of impending doom welled up in the great Empress' heart. A death countdown suddenly appeared in her mind, from which an extremely terrifying aura of death exuded. Most importantly, there were only 10 seconds left on this countdown. 10, 9. The great Empress knew that Enlin was completely unable to break the death countdown for her. She could only fight with her life on the line. Even if she had to die, she had to fight for the Snow Maidens. The great Empress let loose a clear cry and unleashed a blood mystic technique to inject all of her power into the frost essence spike. Just as the heavenly time god was about to block the divine tool with her right hand and grant the great Empress death with her left hand, a black light flashed in the distance. The heavenly time god focused her gaze, and a golden barrier materialized before her. However, her power was extremely violent and insane, and it instantly tore through the golden barrier. Die! Enlin roared with rage. In order to unleash this final technique, the vanquish the heavens and slay all evil annihilation technique, he had expended all of his power, including the power to escape. All or nothing. Bam! The heavenly time god's head was pulverized by the power of the evil-slaying sword again. The great Empress discovered that the countdown timer in her mind had also been shattered. This indicated that the heavenly time god's spell technique had been forcibly interrupted, and she was momentarily feeble. It was also at this moment that a celestial Dharch in an imperial robe with the heavens reflected in his eyes appeared before the heavenly time god, and he plunged his hand into the heavenly time god's chest. The heavenly time god's body was punctured by the celestial Thearcha's hand. Punishment on behalf of the heavens, sealing palm of heavenly fate. The celestial Thearcha's eyes were completely emotionless, and it was as if the heavens were falling from the heavens. White veined patterns instantly spread over the heavenly time god's entire body. A burst of mighty power descended from the sky, pressing down upon the heavenly time god's body in a frenzy, as if it were a thorn in heaven and earth that had to be pulled out no matter what. The headless heavenly time god's body trembled violently as she struggled with all her might. However, the more she resisted, the more terrifying the sealing power became. Enlin was ecstatic. They were going to win this time. Chapter 1440. The heavenly time god's aura was becoming more and more feeble. It was quite clear that the celestial Thearcha's seal was very effective. All of the Snow Maidens turned their eyes upon the celestial Dharch. They never imagined that the Sky Emperor, who had not made a move all this time, would be so stunning the moment he made a move. He practically decided the entire battle with a single blow. The heavenly time god was still struggling, but her struggles were completely ineffective, as if she were on her deathbed. The great Empress was astonished. I knew that he could borrow the power of the heavens, but I didn't think that he would be able to do so. If a Tao integration stage super mighty figure were to unleash such a power, they would probably be completely obliterated. Mengji also sighed with emotion. What an impressive technique. The Lord of the Celestial Court really lives up to his reputation. Just this technique alone is not something that we can oppose. Not only was the heavenly time god's aura rapidly weakening, but even her body was quickly shrinking. When she returned to nothingness and her authority returned to the heavenly Tao, she was truly destroyed. Enlin suddenly wanted to land the killing blow. Wouldn't it be great if he could take back the power of time? Not taking into account anything else, just the power of time reversal alone would make him virtually unkillable. However, he still forcefully suppressed that thought. He had to think about the bigger picture. If he interfered and caused the celestial Thearcha's seal to fail, then he would really be condemned for all eternity. Just as Enlin was contemplating this, the celestial Thearcha's expression abruptly shifted. Crap, the power of time can't be returned to the heavenly Tao, the celestial Dharch exclaimed. And Lin was perplexed. Why can't it be returned? Her will is too strong, and I can't erase it, the celestial Dharch replied with a solemn expression. And Lin was enlightened. He had always felt that the heavenly time god was very human-like. She was very expressive and talkative, so it looked like she had a very powerful will. Then what do we do? And Lin asked. The great Empress, Mengji, and the other snow maidens were also looking at the celestial Dharch with nervous expressions. The celestial Dharch heaved a forlorn sigh. I don't know, Unlin. The great Empress. Was he telling them to wait for their deaths? I can't kill her right now, and she can't break free from my seal for now. We're in a stalemate. However, if I can't find a way, she'll be able to regain her freedom when I run out of power, the celestial Dharch said with a despairing expression. And Lin was filled with exhaustion. He had finally given up the chance to escape and decided to fight to the death with the Sky Emperor, but in the end, he was defeated? Wait a minute, he suddenly remembered something. The celestial Dharch and the heavenly time god were locked in a stalemate, so he could take this opportunity to escape. And Lin was itching to make a move. An elated expression appeared on the celestial Thearka's face at the sight of the stirring Unlin. Unlin, have you come up with a good idea? If you do, then just do it. Don't worry about the consequences. I want to escape, Unlin said honestly. The celestial Dharch. Snow Empress. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. I'm risking my life to kill the enemy, and you actually want to betray your teammate? The celestial Dharch felt like he was about to throw up a mouthful of blood. Should he praise Unlin for his true nature, or should he criticize Unlin for being a coward? Unlin thought about it for a moment. Even though his life was important, it really wasn't a good idea to betray the celestial Dharch. But what could he do? Unlin stepped forward, and his body flashed toward the heavenly time god. The heavenly time god's head was gone, but her body was still trembling and struggling. If it weren't for the fact that the celestial Dharch was still sealing her, she would most likely be able to reverse time before flexing in front of everyone again. Unlin paused momentarily before stabbing his sword into the heavenly time god's chest. That's what you get for flexing. The inky black sword blade pierced through the heavenly time god's body, and she shuddered violently, as if she was in a lot of pain. Unlin could sense that the wound was only on the surface, and he hadn't managed to inflict any damage to the core. Could it be that he had stabbed her in the wrong way? Unlin pulled out his evil slaying sword before stabbing it into another part of the Golden Snow Maiden's body. Splat! The Golden Snow Maiden's body shuddered again, as if she was in a lot of pain. Unlin continued to thrust his sword into the Snow Maiden's body relentlessly. He stabbed the Snow Maiden over 100 times in the blink of an eye. Mr. Unlin, hurry up, I can't hold on much longer. The celestial Thearka's features were slightly pale as he gritted his teeth. Unlin's expression darkened. How is that considered slow? The point is that it's useless. As he spoke, he stabbed the Snow Maiden over 100 more times with his sword. The evil slaying sword had a special suppressive effect against these heavenly Tao clones, so all of his attacks landed on the heavenly time god's body with unerring accuracy, but he just couldn't kill her. What do I do, little Xie? Unlin couldn't help but ask his sword spirit. A cold and tender voice sounded. I can't kill her. Your cultivation base is too low, and you won't be able to draw upon enough of my power. Unlin. So this was all because he was too weak? Unlin was feeling a little weary. Why was he the scapegoat? How about we get the celestial Dharch or the great Empress to use you to slay the heavenly gods? Unlin asked. They don't even have the right to use my power, little Xie said with a disdainful expression. Unlin faltered slightly before suggesting, how about you do it yourself? I'm like a duckweed with nowhere to go, and I can't unleash my full power. At the end of the day, it's all because you're too weak, little Xie replied in an indifferent voice. Lin felt like he had been stabbed again, and he stabbed the Snow Maiden over 100 more times as he spoke. The Snow Maiden's intricate and flawless body was already riddled with holes. Her body trembled violently, and she seemed to be unable to maintain her stability as she began to crumble. Not only that, but even her golden divine halo was beginning to crack. Bam! The heavenly time god's body exploded into specks of light. This scene stunned everyone in the arena. "It's over," the great Empress murmured. The celestial Dharch sensed for a while before an ecstatic expression appeared on his face. "This is great. Lin, I can't sense her presence. We've won." "We've won?" Lin looked at the empty space before him with a surprised expression. He then looked at the evil slaying sword with a smile. "Could it be that I'll be able to kill her if I accumulate enough damage?" Little Xie didn't say anything. She seemed to be thinking about something. The celestial Dharch heaved a sigh of relief. Even though he was very tired, a joyful smile appeared on his face. It was definitely a good thing that they were able to eliminate a threat to the human race. Splat! Blood suddenly splattered through the air. The celestial Thearka's smile congealed on his face. A dazzling golden blade radiance pierced through his chest. There were no living beings between heaven and earth. All that remained was a blade projection that had suddenly appeared in his chest. "Wheel of Time," an ethereal voice sounded in the sky. Specks of light converged, and the divine halo was reconstructed. A golden Snow Maiden reappeared between heaven and earth. It was the heavenly time god. She had been resurrected, completely unscathed. All of the Snow Maidens were in despair. Lin also drew a sharp intake of breath upon seeing this. "Kacha!" A crisp sound rang out. The heavenly time god's reconstructed divine halo suddenly began to crack. Chapter 1441. The heavenly time god didn't seem to care about that small rift. Time reversal. His divine halo flashed with light. Lin's eyes widened, and he was just about to yell at the heavenly time god for cheating when he discovered that the crack on his divine halo hadn't healed. The heavenly time god's brows furrowed slightly. Time reversal. Another burst of light flashed. The crack in the divine ring was still there. Time reversal. Buzz! Time reversal. Buzz! Turning back time, the heavenly time god's expression gradually crumbled, as if she had encountered something extremely infuriating and terrifying, and she was determined to seal that crack. The celestial Dharch took this opportunity to escape. His aura was extremely weak. It was as if the energy in his body had been sucked dry by the golden blade aura. However, he was still alive. Why is there a seam? My perfect body will not allow such a flaw to exist." The heavenly time god gritted her teeth and ignored even Lin and the celestial Dharch. She was like an obsessive-compulsive patient as she continued to use time reversal techniques to repair her divine halo. Lin and the celestial Dharch were both a little dumbstruck, wondering what the heavenly time god was up to. The celestial Dharch quickly calmed himself down, and he clasped a hand over the wound on his chest. The heavenly time god is in a very strange state, so the crack on her divine halo could very well be our breakthrough point. Lin nodded in agreement. There's a possibility that her divine halo can't be repaired by reversing the flow of time. There's something special about her divine halo, and it's already damaged beyond repair. Another possibility is that her time reversal has failed, or her strength has weakened. They looked at each other and saw hope in each other's eyes. The heavenly time god was not invincible. She was also weakening. As long as we hold on, we can win. At this moment, a blinding light suddenly filled everyone's vision. Lin and the celestial Thearka's hearts skipped a beat as an aura of death enveloped their bodies. Following that, the Sky Emperor's chest was once again pierced by a slender hand, and his flesh was torn apart in an instant. Puff! The celestial Dharch spat out a mouthful of blood and hurriedly retreated in an attempt to shake off the enemy. Then, a slap went straight for his head, as if wanting to smash his head into pieces. Fortunately, the celestial arch had an iron head and withstood this palm's strike. However, his body was still smashed into the ground like a meteorite, creating a crater over 1,000 meters in diameter. Evil sword technique second style, flash stab. Unlin instantly appeared before the heavenly time god with his evil slaying sword in hand, before stabbing toward the divine halo above her head. Bang! At an even faster speed, a pair of hands clamped down on the incoming blade. Unlin suddenly felt that his swords had encountered an extremely terrifying resistance, and he couldn't stab any further. He focused his gaze to discover that his evil-slaying sword had been intercepted by the heavenly time god barehanded. To a sword immortal, this was an utter humiliation. "You're still trying to stab my ring? You're still trying to stab my ring. It's clearly cracked, it's clearly flawed, and it's no longer perfect, so why aren't you letting it go?" The heavenly time god roared with rage. Unlin looked at the heavenly time god, who had already lost her rationality, and he was unable to muster up any joy. He had a feeling that this golden snow maiden was several times more terrifying than before. A cruel smile suddenly appeared on the golden snow maiden's face. "Before you die, I'm going to torture you, just like how you tortured me. I remember that you've already stabbed me 300 times, so I have to pay you back in kind." Unlin's heart jolted with shock. He didn't think that the heavenly time god would hold such a grudge. The golden snow maiden's smile crumbled as she continued, "Hence, I'm going to stab you 30,000 times." Unlin's eyes widened with incredulity as he stared at the golden snow maiden. "What the f***ck? I stabbed you 300 times, so you're paying me back in kind? Shouldn't you be stabbing me 300 times instead? What kind of tit-for-tat was this?" Just as he was in shock, a golden light flashed from the heavenly time god's eyes, and a sharp pain erupted from 100 different parts of Unlin's body at the same time. Blood splattered through the air, instantly staining his white, Taoist robe. 100 bloody holes riddled his chest, abdomen, and limbs. Not only was he suffering from the excruciating pain of his flesh being torn apart, but even his bones felt like they had been pulverized. Unlin was instantly covered in blood, and he couldn't help but let loose a cry. The heavenly time god had made Unlin experience extreme physical pain. Unlin's only thought at this moment was to run. However, before he had a chance to do anything, a golden cage began to ensnare him. "That's the first strike," the heavenly time god spoke in an indifferent voice. Unlin drew a sharp intake of breath, and his mind was a little befuddled. "The first strike? You stabbed me 100 king holes, and that was only one strike? So the heavenly time god's 30,000 strikes were actually 3 million strikes?" Unlin was in despair. He had only stabbed the heavenly time god 300 times, but her vengeance was far too intense. Couldn't she show some mercy? Was she a demon? No, he shouldn't have been able to last until 3 million strikes. After all, he was almost completely crippled by the heavenly time god's strike. "Time reversal," the golden snow maiden suddenly said. "Unlin." A golden light enshrouded Unlin, and a peculiar power healed all of his injuries, returning him to the state he had been in before the heavenly time god's strike. Even though he had recovered, the pain and exhaustion from being stabbed 100 times still lingered in his mind. Then, a low voice that sounded like a devil's whisper could be heard. The second sword, splat. Blood splattered through the air as Unlin's blood-curdling cries intermingled. Unlin's body was punctured 100 times again. The excruciating pain almost made his brain convulse. "Time reversal," the snow maiden continued. An expression of shock and horror appeared on Unlin's face. That's right, if he was about to die like this, he could use time reversal. He could indeed be stabbed 3 million times, and he could even be tortured for eternity. However, he wasn't the type to just sit and wait for death. In the instant that he recovered from his injuries, he let loose an almighty roar as he slashed his evil-slaying sword toward the heavenly time god. You still want to struggle? The heavenly time god cackled maniacally as she grabbed onto the blade of the evil-slaying sword with one hand, while her other hand transformed into a sharp golden sword that instantly punctured another 100 holes into Enlin's body. The third strike. Enlin howled with anguish again. Time reversal. The heavenly time god used time reversal again. This time, Enlin switched from offense to defense as he unleashed his evading turtle technique. The fourth strike. The evading turtle technique was corroded and punctured by the power of time. Enlin was stabbed 100 times again, and indescribable pain and exhaustion surged through his entire body. The Golden Snow Maiden. Time reversal. Enlin's expression darkened. I want you to cry, I want you to shit. The Golden Snow Maiden remained expressionless. The fifth strike. Enlin howled with anguish. The Golden Snow Maiden. Time reversal. Rainbow lightning. Lightning surged from Enlin's fingertip. The Golden Snow Maiden dispelled the lightning with a palm. The sixth strike. Enlin howled with anguish. The Golden Snow Maiden. Time reversal. Enlin. Nuclear mountain quaking fist. The seventh strike. Time reversal. Sword burial. Extinguishing lotus immortal sword. The eighth strike. Enlin resisted with all his might, but the Golden Snow Maiden was able to easily nullify all of his spell techniques. On the contrary, Enlin was riddled with holes over and over again. Regenerate, torture, regenerate, torture, regenerate, endless loop. He could swear that this was the first time he had ever experienced such terrifying torture. There seemed to be no end to it, and pain was his only source of existence. Enlin was still resisting, but he knew that if things continued like this, he would go insane sooner or later. Chapter 1442. Millions of snow maidens on the ground below witnessed this extremely tragic scene. Some of them couldn't bear to watch, some of them prayed to the ice matriarch, and some of them unleashed spell techniques in a frenzy to attack the heavenly time god, even though they knew that doing so could very well spell death for them. However, the heavenly time god seemed to be doing something extremely important and didn't have the time to deal with them. All she did was set up a golden barrier, and she was already invincible. After that, she continued to torture Enlin within the barrier. Enlin, the celestial Dharch, crawled up from the ground with great difficulty and threw up another mouthful of blood. The heavenly time god had punctured his chest, and even his head had almost exploded, but he knew that the pain he was experiencing right now was not even 1% of what Enlin was experiencing. The heavenly time god had unleashed her power of the heavenly gods, so there was no way she could break through this barrier in a short time. Analyze. The celestial Dharch stared at the heavenly time god's golden barrier as countless streams of information flashed through his eyes. He could only hope that Enlin would be able to last until he finished analyzing the barrier. Only then would they have a chance at survival. Ice Matriarch, what are you doing? Mengji grabbed onto Shangguan Yi with a tense expression on her face. I'm going to use the power of the Ice Matriarch, Shangguan Yi said as she held onto the Ice Matriarch's heart. Mengji's expression shifted again as she roared, Are you insane? Your body can't handle the Ice Matriarch's power right now. You'll die if you use it by force. Shangguan Yi turned to Mengji with a resolute smile on her face. Enlin is here to save us. Are you going to stand by and watch him be tortured to death? Mengji opened her mouth, but she didn't know what to say. If we can obtain a power that transcends beyond the Tao integration stage in an instant, there might still be some hope. Shangguan Yi took a deep breath as she tightened her grip on the Ice Matriarch's heart. Within the golden barrier. Time reversal. A peculiar power enshrouded the bloodied Enlin, and his body instantly recovered to its original state. Enlin's mouth gaped open, and his entire body convulsed uncontrollably. His body had recovered, and he wasn't going to die. However, the torturous pain still lingered in his mind, stacking on top of each other, causing him to sink into extreme terror and trauma. 18th strike, the heavenly time god announced with a cruel smile. And Lin felt despair. This was only the 18th sword strike? If the heavenly time god unleashed all 30,000 sword strikes, he really would go insane. He didn't think that there would be such a vengeful enemy in this world. The heavenly time god was the embodiment of a heavenly god, so why couldn't she have some dignity and magnanimity? Right at this moment, the heavenly time god's 18th sword strike had already fallen. And Lin suddenly remembered that he hadn't even started to resist before this sword strike. Every time he resisted, it was a kind of attitude. It represented his unyielding spirit even in death. No matter what, I will fight you. This was a battle, not a simple abuse. However, the heavenly time god was simply too fast, and he didn't have time to cast a spell. Forget it, I'll just poke him with my finger. As he spoke, and Lin stretched out his finger and thought to himself, I'll poke you to death. At this moment, the system suddenly flashed. The move that had been dull all this time suddenly glowed with color. Perhaps it was because of your strong will to poke me, or perhaps it was because of your roar of unwillingness after being tortured thousands of times by the authority, which awakened a certain technique that had been dormant. In an instant, heaven and earth fell silent. The heavenly time god experienced time slowing down for the first time. She could see an index finger approaching her relentlessly. The index finger was covered in a dazzling golden divine light, as if it were a golden finger. It wasn't coming toward her very quickly, but she felt as if there was no way to evade it. It was as if this finger was the only thing in this entire world, and it could puncture the heavens with a single flick of its finger. The heavenly time god immediately switched from offense to defense. Time decay. A golden ball of light imbued with the power of time appeared before her. However, the finger tore through the ball of light in an extremely violent manner before flying toward the heavenly time god with killing intent. Upon initial mastery, it could annihilate all things, and upon phenomenal mastery, it could puncture space, pierce through time, and pulverize the great Tao. Finger of the heavenly Tao. The technique that had been dormant for many years and deemed unfit for use by the system suddenly reappeared in this world. And Lin also came to a realization in that instant, and he unleashed the finger of the heavenly Tao without holding back. Furthermore, he unleashed it with his full power. The finger fell. Boom. The sky was instantly sliced in half by the power of the golden finger. The clouds dissipated, and the unstoppable power of the golden finger tore through the air like a surging heavenly river. The tip of the finger fell upon the heavenly time god's forehead. The heavenly time god's blood-curdling cries erupted throughout heaven and earth, as if she was in excruciating pain. All of the snow maidens could see the finger piercing through heaven and earth. It was so mighty and unstoppable, striking all of them with the urge to submit to it. If it were aimed at the heavens, perhaps it would even puncture a hole in the heavens. Is this sect leader and Lin's technique so powerful? What kind of power is this? There seems to be no end in sight to this finger. I'm scared that he'll accidentally destroy this world. Can he win? Sect leader and Lin's attack can even sink an entire continent. How is that enemy going to defend herself against it? She'll definitely be reduced to ashes. All of the snow maidens discussed spiritedly among themselves. The power of Lin's finger of the heavenly Tao had been completely unleashed. The heavenly time god let loose a blood-curdling wail as a hole was punctured in her forehead. Then, her entire body began to crack open and crumble. In the end, her entire body was reduced to ashes by the power of the finger. The golden light in the heavens dissipated. And Lin was the only one left in the sky. As for the heavenly time god, she had already been reduced to ashes. Heaven and earth suddenly fell silent. What followed was a tsunami of cheers. Sect leader and Lin is so cool. Wah! We finally won. Thank you, sect leader and Lin. That finger is way too terrifying. What kind of technique is that? as expected of the war god of the celestial court. Unlin is the best. I love you. Some of the snow maidens had completely let go of their pride as they yelled at the man in the sky. All of the snow maidens were either whooping with joy or shedding tears of joy. This battle had not been easy to win. Just as all of the snow maidens were cheering with excitement, a man in a flowing white robe suddenly expanded, and his skin was showing signs of cracking. Look, sect leader Unlin doesn't seem to be in a good state. What's going on with him? Why isn't he moving? His body seems to be expanding. Am I hallucinating? Just as all of the snow maidens were discussing spiritedly among themselves. Bam! Unlin exploded again right before everyone's eyes. Boundless blood mist erupted from his body. A thick blood mist enshrouded the entire space like a blooming red flower. Chapter 1443. Unlin's self-detonation gave countless snow maidens a massive fright. The Great Empress reacted the quickest, and she instantly appeared before Unlin before unleashing an ice seal spell technique to freeze his injuries before cradling him in her arms. Unlin, are you all right? What happened? The Great Empress asked in a concerned voice. Unlin opened his exhausted eyes. His powerful body of the war god was able to keep him from fainting on the spot, but he was completely drained of all energy. I'm all right. I won't die. It's just a side effect of using a spell technique. He spoke in a feeble voice as he cursed the system in his heart for being so heartless. He had finally managed to unleash the finger of the heavenly Tao, but it had to self-detonate again. Did it have to be such a bully? He really couldn't afford to unleash the finger of the heavenly Tao again. He was lucky last time as Chang-Yi had stepped in to save him. This time, it was all thanks to his thick skin that he was still breathing. Just as Unlin was grumbling incessantly to himself, the Great Empress brought out the only regenerative immortal pill she had left from her storage ring before placing it into Unlin's mouth with her slender, translucent hand. A burst of cool energy began to flow through his entire body, quickly healing his injuries. The immortal pill was most likely of a very high rank, and its power was fully unleashed by the evergreen technique. All of his injuries were healing at a rate discernible to the naked eye. Unlin was struck by a sense of comfort. Only then did he realize that he was being carried by the Great Empress. Her arms were wrapped around his waist, and his back was pressed tightly against the Great Empress's body. There was a soft and bouncy sensation on his back. The Great Empress slowly descended to the ground with him in her arms. In the wind, in the snow, in the Great Empress's arms. At this moment, he felt like he was in a dream. The contrast was too great. It was as if he had suddenly gone from a hell of endless torture to a paradise on earth. The celestial Dharch, Mengji, and Shangguan-Yi quickly flew over to assess his injuries. Mr. Unlin. Unlin, are you all right? My God, why did you suddenly self-detonate? Everyone asked with concern and comfort. Unlin didn't want to talk, and just wanted to lie quietly in the Empress's arms. Unlin, I recall that you have a coffin with you. Hurry up and lie down in the coffin to recuperate, the celestial Dharch said with a concerned expression. Unlin rolled his eyes and pulled out the coffin from his storage ring. He lifted the lid of the coffin and was about to lie inside. Suddenly, he saw a golden light flickering in front of him. His pupils shrank slightly, and even his heartbeat slowed by half a beat. He knew that the nightmarish voice rang out again. Time roulette. Following the sound of the wheel turning, ka-ka-ka, the light spots converged. Time was like a surging river, vast and distant, flowing without end. A unique aura spread throughout the world. Everyone stared at the spot where the light spots converged, and for a moment, they were so nervous that they forgot to breathe. For some reason, they suddenly had a terrifying conjecture. Motes of light converged to reveal a slim and slender figure, exquisite and perfect features, long golden hair that flowed like a waterfall, and a divine halo that exuded a supreme might. The heavenly time god had reappeared. The conjecture that they were most worried about had finally come true. Almost everyone who saw this scene forgot to breathe, and Lin's expression was filled with despair. His body, which had only just recovered, was throbbing with pain again. Even the finger of the heavenly Tao couldn't kill her, so what else could he do? In his current condition, he wouldn't even be able to unleash the first fist technique, let alone the finger of the heavenly Tao again. The heavenly time god appeared before everyone again, and she glowered at Lin with a pair of golden eyes, as if there was an irreconcilable vendetta between her and Lin. Gotcha! The crisp sound of something cracking suddenly erupted. The divine halo above her head cracked again. There were 2 more cracks on the divine halo than before, so there were now a total of 3 cracks on the divine halo. Lin didn't know how much the heavenly time god would be affected by the appearance of 3 cracks on the divine halo, but he knew that this was definitely going to be a massive blow to him. My halo, why did you crack again? The heavenly time god's hands trembled slightly as she stroked the divine halo above her head with an expression of shock and grief on her face. The title of heavenly time god gave Lin a sense of discomfort. All of you must die. This is unforgivable. I'm going to torture all of you for countless years. The golden snow maiden roared as the divine halo above her head lit up with a scintillating light. At the same time, she gripped the air with one hand. A golden pillar of light descended from the heavens before converging in her hand. The heavenly time god gripped the pillar of light, and it was as if she were holding a heaven-piercing stone pillar that was exuding an eternal and indestructible aura. 1,000-year sword. The golden snow maiden flicked her wrist, and a golden pillar of light fell from the sky, covering countless kilometers. Everything on the ground below was within the range of the golden pillar of light. I'm going to trap all of you in my time for all eternity and make you suffer eternal torture and refinement. Only then will I be able to alleviate my hatred for my halo cracking. It was a pillar of light, but it was also a sharp sword with an unstoppable sharpness. Regardless of whether it was the celestial Dharch or all of the snow maidens, all of them were struck by a sense of crisis as they stared at the massive pillar of light falling from the sky. Are we going to die here? Meng Ji murmured. Lin was in despair. No, we're not going to die. Didn't she say that she was going to trap us in her time and make us suffer eternal torture and refinement? Lin did not doubt the heavenly time god's words at all. She had told him that she was going to slice Lin 30,000 times, and she really dared to do that. Boom! The pillar of light fell and engulfed Lin, the celestial Dharch, and millions of snow maidens. After the light dissipated, only the heavenly time god remained standing in midair. The ground below was completely empty. There were no living creatures at all. It was completely silent. The heavenly time god's smile had completely crumbled. Finally, I can finally make you sinners who destroyed my rings experience the most terrifying pain in this world. My 1,000-year sword is imbued with the boundless power of time. They have created a cycle of life and death that can trap all living beings in an endless cycle of time. Come, let's begin cycle 1. The heavenly time god's eyes flashed, and her consciousness descended into the sea of time. Everything was deathly silent and dark. A gentle voice suddenly sounded beside his ear. Lin. Lin struggled to open his eyes and was greeted by the sight of an exquisitely beautiful woman in a jade dress looking at him with concern etched on her face. There was a pair of warm, jade-like hands pressed tightly against his face. You're finally awake. Are you feeling better? A vibrant smile appeared on the woman's face. Xiaolan. Lin rose to his feet and pounced toward her like a tiger before wrapping his arms around her. You're still injured, so you need to rest. Su Xiaolan struggled for a moment. Lin could indeed feel that his body was very feeble, so he let go with a blank expression. Why am I here? Why am I back? Wasn't he battling the heavenly time god? Why was he in Su Xiaolan's room after waking up? He felt like his surroundings were very realistic, not like he was in a dream. The celestial Dharch saved you. Su Xiaolan brought over a bowl of medicine with a smile. Enlin, it's time to take your medicine. Chapter 1444. Enlin looked at the fragrant medicine that Su Xiaolan had brought over. I'm severely injured, so I can't drink it myself. I need you to feed me. Su Xiaolan chuckled. Look at you. Fine, I'll feed you. She took out a spoon and fed the medicine into Enlin's mouth mouthful by mouthful. Enlin felt warm all over as he drank the medicine. He sighed in his heart. This was such a wonderful life. The previous battle was like hell, and he didn't want to go through it a second time. He finished the medicine and was about to lie down comfortably. All of a sudden, an intense discomfort came from his body. First, there was a sharp pain in his stomach. Then, he felt like his skin was being torn apart. The pain seeped into his bones and spread to his soul. It felt like his soul was going to be torn apart and destroyed along with it. Ah! Enlin screamed in agony. Enlin, how are you feeling? Su Xiaolan looked at Enlin and asked with a smile. Enlin was dumbfounded when he saw the sinister smile on Su Xiaolan's face. Then, a conjecture that he didn't dare to believe came to his mind. Xiaolan, could it be that your medicine? Enlin's lips trembled as he exclaimed. I did it. Does it taste good? A cold smile appeared on Su Xiaolan's face as she lifted Enlin's chin with a slender, pristine finger. She seemed to be entranced by Enlin's pained expression. Why did you do this? I don't believe it. Enlin's heart ached. It was 1,000 times more painful than the pain he was feeling on his body. Su Xiaolan smiled. Why? Don't you know why I did this? Enlin was at a complete loss. He really didn't know why this was happening. Su Xiaolan didn't wait for Enlin to speak. She said bitterly, The Empress of the Shui clan hugged you. Why do you think I did that? Enlin's eyes widened. Hee. Su Xiaolan laughed with a sickly face. Men like you who are fickle, and abandoned should die. Suddenly, an immense pain surged through Enlin's body, as if every inch of his skin was about to be torn apart. Enlin's entire body convulsed and he foamed at the mouth. The pain instantly reached its peak. His legs kicked, his eyes rolled back, and he breathed his last. Enlin dead. In a deep sea of consciousness. In absolute darkness. A gentle voice rang in his ears. Enlin. Enlin opened his eyes and was dazed by the warm candlelight. So he didn't die. That's great, it was just a false alarm. He saw a woman sitting quietly beside him with a gentle smile on her face. The woman was very happy. You're finally awake. Are you feeling better now, Xiaolan? I just had a nightmare. Enlin was a little frightened. Don't be afraid, it was just a dream. I'm here with you. Su Xiaolan hugged Enlin lightly, as if trying to reassure him. Enlin was indeed less panicked as he basked in the warmth of her embrace. It's so good to have you by my side. Enlin sighed. You're still injured, so take care of yourself. Su Xiaolan patted Enlin's back and stood up. She brought a bowl over from the table with a vibrant smile. Come, Enlin, drink your medicine. Enlin. The memories flooded him like a tide, causing him to suck in a deep breath of cold air, and his body trembled. He stared blankly at the spirit medicine in Su Xiaolan's hand and panicked. What was going on? What was going on? Was that a dream? Was it real now? Enlin's mind was in a mess, and he was thinking about many things. What's wrong, Enlin? You don't look well, Su Xiaolan said with concern. Enlin looked at Su Xiaolan with some fear. I don't want to drink medicine now, I just want to rest. Su Xiaolan faltered slightly before she said with tears in her eyes, I've been brewing this medicine for an hour. You should at least drink some. It's a token of my sincerity. Enlin couldn't bear to see her like this, but he was also a little worried. There's nothing wrong with this medicine, right? Su Xiaolan's eyes reddened upon hearing this. What do you mean? Nothing. Enlin hurriedly accepted the medicine, only to find that his entire body was so feeble that he couldn't even hold a bowl properly. Come, let me feed you. Su Xiaolan took the bowl in a very considerate manner before picking up a spoon and feeding him mouthful by mouthful. Lin, what was going on with this seemingly familiar scene? Let me tell you something first. I was severely wounded during my battle with the heavenly time god, and the great Empress of the Snow Maidens held me in her arms to help me recover. Lin spoke with a serious expression. Su Xiaolan cocked her head to the side. Oh, I get it. Why are you telling me this? Lin was relieved to see that Su Xiaolan's expression was completely normal, and he drank the spirit medicine in Su Xiaolan's hand one mouthful at a time. A warm and extremely comfortable feeling instantly spread through his entire body. You're the best, Xiaolan. Lin lay on his bed with an elated expression. Of course I'm good to you. Su Xiaolan smiled. But unfortunately, you're not good to me. Everyone suddenly fell silent. A sense of foreboding welled up in Lin's heart. In the next instant, an excruciating pain shot through his entire body. First, there was an unbearable pain in his stomach, which then spread to every inch of his skin and even to his bones and consciousness. He felt as if the power of the medicine was going to tear his body apart. Lin howled with pain. Why are you doing this to me? He roared with rage and confusion. Hee. Su Xiaolan chuckled coldly. Do you really think I don't know that you kissed the 9-colored divine vermilion bird? You actually got involved with a bird. Lin. No, let me explain. This is all a misunderstanding. Lin explained in a loud voice. I'm not listening. I'm not listening. I'm not listening. Su Xiaolan shook her head relentlessly. Then, a cruel smile appeared on her face. Fickle, heartless, and disloyal men like you deserve to be destroyed by the heavens. Die. Boom. The medicine erupted. Lin frothed at the mouth amidst the excruciating pain, and his vision darkened as his legs gave way. Death, a vast expanse of darkness and chaos ensued. A gentle voice sounded. Lin. Lin was on the verge of tears upon hearing this voice. He had thought that he had arrived in heaven, but he had instead arrived in King Hell. Even an idiot would know that things were not as simple as they seemed now. It wasn't just that he had died and resurrected again and again. It was that everything he was experiencing now was extremely real and definitely not an illusion. He seemed to have fallen into a vicious cycle of reality. Once he died, he would resurrect on the bed, and Lin had already decided that he was going to sleep like this and not get up for now. Hurry up, Lin, get up and take your medicine. Su Xiaolan's voice reverberated beside his ear. You're not getting up? No, I can't. The medicine has already been brewed, so I can't waste it. Su Xiaolan brought over a bowl of medicine and poured it into Lin's mouth, without even caring whether he had woken up or not. Chapter 1445. Lin was dumbstruck by this scene. She was trying to murder her Dao partner while he was pretending to be asleep. Lin's body was extremely feeble, so he was no match for Su Xiaolan's powerful attacks. He had no choice but to swallow a few more mouthfuls, and he almost lost his soul. He knew that he was going to die, and he opened his eyes with grief and indignation. Lin, you're awake? Su Xiaolan smiled. Lin was on the brink of a mental breakdown. Xiaolan, I really didn't do anything against my conscience. The Great Empress and the 9-colored divine vermilion bird are all just misunderstandings. Su Xiaolan blinked with confusion. What are you talking about? Why are you suddenly bringing them into this? Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this before falling silent. Misunderstandings? No, things definitely weren't that simple. Moments later, a familiar burst of pain erupted from his abdomen before instantly spreading throughout his entire body. Lin, all right, it was still the same old trick. A cruel smile appeared on Su Xiaolan's face. Lin, are you all right? Lin looked at Su Xiaolan expressionlessly. Tell me, who is it this time? Do you think I don't know what happened between you and Lan Xiaoni? Who would have thought that you wouldn't even spare a single fish? A fickle, heartless, and disloyal man like you deserves to be destroyed by heaven and earth. Die. Su Xiaolan yelled. And Lin dead. The world fell into darkness again. In his murky state of consciousness, a familiar voice sounded again. Unlin opened his eyes to look at the familiar woman before him. The candlelight flickered, illuminating the woman's elegant brows, her bright eyes, her delicate lips, and her face that was filled with concern. Xiaolan. Unlin sat up in shock. He hugged the woman in front of him tightly and said affectionately, I love you. Su Xiaolan was bewildered by the scene in front of her. After a while, she hugged Enlin and said with a smile, I love you too. Enlin rejoiced in his heart. He had finally broken through this hurdle. This move of heaven and earth great shift was a roundabout way to save the country. Through the two of them expressing their intentions, it successfully diverted Su Xiaolan's attention. Wonderful. Enlin, you're badly injured. It's time for you to take your medicine. Su Xiaolan's smile remained unchanged. Enlin, Xiaolan, I really do love you, Enlin said solemnly. Su Xiaolan replied softly, Yes, so, Enlin, it's time for you to take your medicine. Enlin was about to have a mental breakdown. He had already expressed his feelings, so why did she still want to kill him? This didn't make sense. At this moment, Su Xiaolan had already handed over a bowl of spirit medicine with a dainty smile on her face. Enlin reached out to receive the spirit medicine, and he had only just received it when he casually tossed it onto the ground. Bam! The bowl shattered, and the medicine spilled all over the ground. An apologetic expression appeared on Enlin's face. Oh no, my hand slipped. I'm sorry. Su Xiaolan faltered slightly, as if she hadn't expected something like this to happen. However, a smile soon appeared on her face again. I see. It's all right, I'll make you another bowl. No need. I'll be fine after a nap, Enlin said anxiously. No need. Su Xiaolan paused momentarily before walking into the kitchen. Enlin panicked. I already said no need. I don't want to take medicine. You don't need to take medicine. Su Xiaolan's voice sounded from the kitchen. I'll make you something to nourish your body. Enlin finally heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing this. Immediately afterward, he saw Su Xiaolan walk out of the kitchen with a bright hatchet in her hand. The sharp blade was still reflecting an astonishing cold light. Enlin's eyes widened. Xiaolan, why did you bring a hatchet out? Su Xiaolan tilted her head. To cook. To cook? Why did you bring a hatchet out? Enlin was astonished. Oh, that. Because the dish I'm cooking is a famous dish from the celestial court, Su Xiaolan said with a dainty smile. Enlin gulped. What famous dish? Crispy and fragrant braised super pork trotters, Su Xiaolan said. So, go cook in the kitchen. Why are you waving a hatchet in front of me? Enlin's lips twitched. Su Xiaolan smiled. Men are all big pig trotters. I'm here to collect ingredient. Enlin. No, why? I love you, Xiaolan. Enlin was in despair as he struggled with all his might. You still have the nerve to ask me why? Su Xiaolan gritted her teeth. You love me, but you love other people too. Why didn't you say that when you were being lovey-dovey with Xianyuan Cheng? You're really something. I never thought that I would be cuckolded by a man. Su Xiaolan was furious. Enlin was confused. Wait, did you say Big Brother Cheng? Fickle, heartless, and disloyal men like you deserve to be destroyed by the heavens. Die. Su Xiaolan roared as she swung her hatchet toward Enlin. Wait. Su Xiaolan, you've gone too far. Enlin was also enraged. Anyone could be insulted, but he and Big Brother Cheng were not allowed to be insulted. Su Xiaolan didn't seem to hear him at all. She chuckled coldly as she swung the hatchet toward Enlin. Splat! Blood splattered everywhere. The world was dyed red. And Lin was dead. Amidst a sea of chaos and darkness, a gentle and familiar voice sounded once again. Unlin. Unlin knew that this wasn't an illusion, nor was it a nightmare. This was an extremely realistic hell. The terrifying memory of having his body torn apart by the hatchet was deeply imprinted in his mind. The excruciating pain was still spreading throughout his entire body. It wanted the person you loved the most to kill you over and over again. You had to endure both physical and mental torture over and over again in an endless cycle. This was the most vicious torture. Unlin, you're awake. It's time to drink your medicine. Su Xiaolan's smile was still as gentle as ever. Xiaolan, I love you, Unlin said with a serious expression. I know. Here, drink your medicine, Su Xiaolan said with a smile. Unlin was in despair. Su Xiaolan wasn't even going to say, I love you too, this time? Xiaolan, why don't you say you love me too? Unlin was unwilling to give up. Su Xiaolan's smile remained unchanged. I've said it before. If there are any changes in the future, I'll let you know. Unlin. How could there be such a simple answer? Xiaolan, I just want to say that I love you. Even if you give me poison, I'll drink it willingly. Unlin said with a serious expression. Su Xiaolan's hand trembled slightly, and the spirit medicine in the bowl rippled. Unlin looked at Su Xiaolan. Then I'll drink it. Su Xiaolan didn't say anything. Then I'll really drink it? Unlin asked again. Just drink it. What are you waiting for? Su Xiaolan placed the bowl next to Unlin's mouth and gulped down the medicine. Gulp, gulp. Unlin was forced to drink all of the medicine in the bowl. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. Then, the pain spread throughout his entire body, as if his body was going to be torn apart. Su Xiaolan's face was covered in tears as she caressed Unlin's face. Thank you for loving me so much. Even if it's poison, you're willing to drink it willingly. But I'm officially informing you that I don't love you anymore, Unlin. Which eye of yours saw me willingly drink it? Unlin was indignant. Why, Su Xiaolan's expression suddenly crumbled. You sleep with Dabai every day. Don't think I don't know what you're up to? Unlin. This was too insulting. Dabai was a dog. And a male dog. Fickle, heartless, and abandoning men like you deserve to be destroyed by heaven and earth. Go to hell. Su Xiaolan roared as a slap landed on Unlin's face. Slap. Unlin died. In a stretch of darkness. Unlin. Unlin, a gentle female voice sounded in his ear. Don't sleep anymore. It's time to get up and drink your medicine. Just like that, Unlin fell into an inescapable cycle of reincarnation. In this world, he was being killed by the person he loved the most. Blow after blow, bone-deep pain after bone-piercing pain. There seemed to be no end to all of this. Chapter 1446. On the border of the opposite shore realm. A cruel smile appeared on the Snow Maiden's face, which was as translucent as golden jade. Hee hee. I'm so happy to see all of you in pain. It's so hilarious to see all of you wailing in agony and crying. The heavenly time god closed her eyes and murmured to herself, but she didn't bother to disguise the sinister smile on her face. No one was looking anyway, so it didn't matter how perverted her smile was. Unlin, the celestial Larch, and the 100,000,000 snow maidens she had subdued were all in agony after reincarnation, and she was finally able to rest easy. As she savored the taste, she opened her eyes that were as clear as gemstones. The heavenly time god turned toward the south with a smile on her face. The snow maidens have been destroyed, and the human race is my next target. The celestial Larch has already been subdued by me, so who else can pose a threat to me? But even if it's just killing an ant, it takes time and strength. How troublesome! She murmured to herself as she slowly walked forward. Her body became more and more insubstantial, and she was about to undergo spatial travel. Slap! At this moment, a hand suddenly pressed down on her shoulder. The heavenly time god's body shuddered, and an extremely dangerous feeling surged through her entire body. "Who are you?" She didn't turn around in fear of provoking the being behind her. "I'm the human ant that you're going to crush." The being behind her spoke in a cold and indifferent voice. The heavenly time god instantly became very nervous. Her instincts were right. The being behind her was indeed giving her a very dangerous feeling, just like Lin, who had been sucked into the 1,000-year sword. No, he was even more dangerous than Lin in her nervousness. She became even more determined to destroy the entire human race. One human being after another who posed a threat to her did not deserve to exist in this world. It was even time for her to reconsider her proposal to completely wipe out the entire world. In the end, the heavenly time god still turned around to look at the human before her. This was a young cultivator in a coarse linen robe. His skin was fair, and his features were delicate and handsome. His eyes were especially bright and energetic, but his expression was a little colder as he looked at her. "Who are you?" the heavenly time god asked. "Chen Chen." The young man smiled. "The second heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect, Chen Chen." The heavenly time god smiled. "Heaven-crushing sect? What a stupid name. What an arrogant and ignorant gang. Whether it's broken or not, you'll find out in the future." Chen Chen wasn't angry. After a short while, he shook his head and said with a hint of pity, "You could have died a little later. You made a mistake by putting someone in danger. He's the third heavenly disciple of our heaven-crushing sect." The heavenly time god wasn't interested in Chen Chen's **t, but she couldn't help but ask, "Who is it?" "It's him." Chen Chen smiled as he extended a hand toward the heavenly time god. That hand clearly wasn't affecting anything between heaven and earth, but it was expanding infinitely in the heavenly time god's field of vision, obscuring the entire heavens. In the end, it was as if it were going to grasp the entire heaven and earth in its hand. The heavenly time god's expression shifted drastically, and she hurtled back in retreat. At the same time, a huge amount of golden light turned into a circle and enveloped his body. That was the power of time decay. Any energy that entered the range of her halo would be annihilated into nothingness by the power of time. "I'm as insignificant as a speck of dust, so why should I fear the passage of time?" Chen Chen spoke in an indifferent voice. As he spoke, his body had already charged into the halo of time decay and appeared right before the heavenly time god. The heavenly time god's pupils contracted. The power of time decay was completely ineffective against him. Heaven-crushing technique, palm heaven. Chen Chen's hand reached toward the heavenly time god's chest, and his 5 fingers were imbued with the power of 5 different elements as well as the power of destruction and rebirth in his palm. The heavenly time god wanted to evade, but there was nowhere to evade. It was as if she couldn't evade Chen Chen's palm no matter where she hid. Bam! Chen Chen's palm fell upon the heavenly time god's chest, and he seemed to have grabbed onto something before pulling it out. In the beginning, it was only an oval ball of light. Soon, countless balls of light began to appear, and they began to peel away at a faster and faster rate. In the end, a golden light engulfed the entire earth. Time flew by. One snow maiden after another appeared on the ground. They were either wailing with anguish or weeping with anguish. Mengji, Shangguanyi, the Snow Maiden Emperors, and the Celestial Larch also appeared one after another. On top of a building not far away, a tall and slender woman in a rainbow-colored imperial robe with peerlessly beautiful features and beautiful dragon horns hugged a white, furry ball in her arms as she looked in Chen Chen's direction with an envious expression. What a powerful technique! Is this the heaven-crushing technique that I'm supposed to learn? The white ball flapped its little wings with excitement on its face. A single heaven and earth reversal technique is able to play with heaven and earth in the palm of his hand. How majestic! This is what it means to be the most powerful being in the entire world. Is he the second heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect? I'm already head over heels in love with him, and I wish I could die." All of a sudden, the white ball's expression froze, and its voice came to an abrupt halt, as if it had seen something extremely incredible. "How could this be? My 1,000-year sword was broken by you?" The heavenly time god stared at the man before her with incredulity on her face. Chen Chen's expression remained calm as a golden ball of light shattered in his palm. A person slowly revealed their true form and appeared in front of him. A rare hint of arrogance appeared in Chen Chen's voice. "He is the third heavenly disciple of my heaven-crushing sect. I followed the aura of the finger of the heavenly Tao here to save him." The heavenly time god came to a sudden realization upon seeing the man. That's right, this man was indeed the most dazzling living being among the human race. It was understandable that Chen Chen had come to save him. That was because this man was none other than Enlin. Chen Chen didn't even get a chance to say anything before Enlin abruptly threw his arms around Chen Chen and howled with tears. "What? I was wrong, Xiaolan. I'm a fickle, and unfaithful man. I should be destroyed by the heavens. Can you forgive me?" Sob, sob, sob. Enlin wiped his tears and snot onto Chen Chen's linen clothes. The heavenly time god's mouth gaped open slightly as she stared at the scenes unfolding before her eyes. Chen Chen looked at Enlin expressionlessly, and he suddenly regretted his decision to save Enlin. He was saving the third heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect, not this nut job. This was way too King humiliating. Enlin suddenly felt like something was wrong as he sobbed and sobbed. How could Xiaolan's clothes be so coarse? And her body wasn't that hard either. He raised his head to discover a man looking at him with a cold expression. "Holy F***ck. Who the F***ck are you?" Enlin was given a massive fright, and he immediately pushed Chen Chen away. He focused his gaze and was elated. "It's you, Chen Chen? If I hadn't come, you would have continued to be a fickle, heartless, and disloyal man," Chen Chen said expressionlessly. An awkward expression appeared on Enlin's face. He looked around at the vast environment around him, and he fell into a daze again at the sight of all types of intricately carved ice castles. It was as if a very long time had passed, as if a lifetime had passed. "I'm back. I'm finally back." Enlin wept tears of joy. Chapter 1447. No one knew what Enlin had experienced. He was the only one who knew how he had survived this period of time. He had reincarnated again and again, and he had been killed again and again. No matter how much he struggled, it was useless. Enlin swore that even if hell existed in the mortal world, it definitely wouldn't be this terrifying. If Chen Chen had arrived any later, perhaps Enlin would have already gone insane by the time he had rescued him. At the top of a palace stood the great empress of the evil dragon tribe. The white ball of fur in her arms was no longer able to remain calm. Master? The white ball of fur spoke with incredulity. Never would it have thought that it would encounter its master under such circumstances. The ancient dragon empress, the new Tao integration stage super mighty figure, and the fourth heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect, was also staring blankly at the white-robed man in the distance. She knew that Chen Chen had come out of seclusion to rescue the legendary third heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect. The heaven-crushing sect had invited him several times, but he had always refused. Even so, the heaven-crushing sect still reserved the position of third heavenly disciple for him. It was also because of that mysterious being that she had joined the heaven-crushing sect that she had to settle for a mysterious being who had never joined the heaven-crushing sect before. The ancient dragon empress often wondered just what kind of supremely talented prodigy could be so highly regarded by the supreme mighty figures of the heaven-crushing sect. She was very much looking forward to meeting the legendary third heavenly disciple. Who would have thought that she would actually meet the third heavenly disciple today? Not only that, but it was also someone she had seen before. "So it's you, the turtle cultivator." The ancient dragon empress almost threw up a mouthful of blood. Wasn't this the cultivator who had been hiding in his turtle shell during their battle in the ancient Tai Chu dragon realm? My God, he's the third heavenly disciple? The ancient dragon empress was struck by the absurdity of this world. To think that she had looked up to him in the past. Wasn't this a little too much of a contrast? However, the ancient dragon empress wasn't a shallow person, and she wouldn't look down on Enlin just because of this. Enlin definitely had some outstanding qualities to be able to catch the attention of the two heavenly disciples. The ancient dragon empress was still looking on intently. She was then greeted by the sight of Enlin wailing with Chun Chun in his arms, wiping away his tears and snot. The scene was so beautiful that the ancient dragon empress couldn't bear to look at it. All of the snow maidens who had been trapped by the 1,000-year sword returned to their temporary abode. They had also gradually regained their senses, and they were struck by the sight of the man who had suddenly appeared before the heavenly time god. Did he save us? He's also a human. All of the snow maidens wore complex expressions as they looked at the youth in linen garments. Senior Chun Chun, thank you for saving me. Enlin said gratefully. You're welcome. Resisting the representatives of the heavenly Tao has always been our responsibility, Chun Chun said with a smile. Enlin faltered upon hearing this. Isn't it your responsibility to crush the heavens? The representatives of the heavenly Tao are also a part of the heavens, Chun Chun patiently explained. Enlin was enlightened. Not far away, the celestial Dharch looked at Chun Chun cautiously. The heaven-crushing sect and the heaven-mending sect were two opposing sects to begin with. Now that the second heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect had appeared here, he couldn't help but be on his guard. A friendly smile appeared on Chun Chun's face upon seeing the celestial Dharch. Now, do you know how useless you are? The celestial Dharch. Our heaven-crushing sect is the true professional when it comes to fighting the heavens. Chun Chun didn't look at the celestial Thearcha's expression. Instead, he turned to Enlin and spoke in a gentle voice. The finger of the heavenly Tao shouldn't be used like that. If you unleash it without restraint, your body will easily collapse. Then how should I use it? Enlin asked. In all honesty, the finger of the heavenly Tao was extremely powerful. However, there was one thing that gave him the biggest headache, and that was the after effects of using it. A warm smile appeared on Chun Chun's face. Do you want to learn? Join the heaven-crushing sect and I'll teach you. Enlin. No. Chun Chun wasn't angered by this. Alright, then I'll still teach you. I just so happen to have some material here. He turned toward the golden snow maidens as he spoke. The heavenly time god immediately turned around and transformed into a streak of light in an attempt to escape. Let me teach you how to fight the heavens first. Chun Chun spoke with a smile as his body abruptly disappeared on the spot. In the next instant, he had already appeared directly above the streak of light. He put his hands together, and a black vortex appeared behind him, as if it could suck in all things. If you want to escape as a streak of light, then I'll give you a black hole that can suck in even light. Heaven-crushing technique, Dark Tao Child. The black vortex suddenly exploded. Heaven and earth abruptly dimmed. Everything in this world was reduced to nothingness. In that instant, Enlin felt as if even his consciousness was about to be sucked away. The heavenly time god's scream erupted from Chun Chun's direction. The streak of golden light was like a shirt that was relentlessly torn apart by the darkness. Soon, the golden light revealed her true form, which was the heavenly time god in the form of a golden snow maiden. Chun Chun appeared before the heavenly time god, and his fist was enshrouded in golden light as it expanded in her field of vision. Heaven-crushing technique, Fist of the Heavenly Tao. Bam! An earth-shattering explosion erupted. The heavenly time god was punched into the ground, and the earth tremored violently. Chun Chun turned to Enlin. When using heaven-crushing techniques, you have to know how to control and unleash them at will. You have to suppress the power of the technique and strike with the most precision. If you unleash all of your power in one go, not only will it be detrimental to your own body, but it'll also be difficult for you to continue to inflict damage on your enemy. The heavenly time god lay in the massive crater, and another crack sounded as another crack appeared on her divine halo. She was about to go insane. Ah! My Xiao Huan Huan! The 3 cracks on her divine halo became 4. Chen Chen's brows furrowed. Xiao Huan Huan? What kind of disgusting name is that? He stepped forward and flashed toward the heavenly time god again. Heaven-crushing technique, kick of the heavenly Tao. Chen Chen's foot seemed to have transcended space and time, and it instantly reached the heavenly time god's lower abdomen, upon which her petite body was kicked into the shape of a bow. Bam! Another earth-shattering explosion erupted. The heavenly time god was kicked back tens of thousands of meters, and a 5th crack appeared on her divine halo. Chen Chen continued to press his advantage. Die! A ferocious expression appeared on the heavenly time god's face, and the light from her divine halo suddenly became as dazzling as the sun as she unleashed a palm toward Chen Chen. The power of time that had been tempered by countless years swept toward Chen Chen like a tsunami. Everything in the wake of the palm was reduced to extremely minuscule specks of dust. Time dust. Chen Chen could sense an extremely dense power of time within this attack. Anyone who fell into the heavenly time god's power would be subjected to the power of time. He didn't dare to underestimate his opponent, and he unleashed his fist of the heavenly Tao to clash with the heavenly time god's palm. Boom! The 2 attacks collided at the same time, and heaven and earth exploded. At the center of the collision, space twisted and shattered, time fell into chaos, and all things were destroyed, as if heaven and earth were returning to primal chaos. Even the earth was cracked open for several hundred kilometers by the shockwave. Lin's heart was pounding with fear. Was this what Chen Chen meant by using a heaven-crushing technique to suppress his own power? This world was about to be destroyed by him. Just as he was feeling astonished, the system in his mind suddenly began to flash violently. Chapter 1448. The system, which had been idle all this time, actually lit up at this moment. Lin's heart jolted with shock, and he immediately injected his consciousness into his system. All of a sudden, an extremely dazzling light almost blinded him. A string of information flowed into his mind in a frenzy, threatening to make his head explode. Ah! Lin let loose an anguished wail as he clutched his head in agony. The Celestial Dharch, the Great Empress, Shangguan Yi, and the others instantly arrived beside Lin. Mr. Lin, are you all right? What's wrong? Everyone stared at Lin with confusion and concern on their faces. They had injected their power into Lin's body, but aside from the fact that his body was extremely feeble, they didn't discover any other abnormalities. Only Lin knew that he was having such a headache because the spell techniques and true intent that the system had absorbed were far too powerful for him to handle. Heaven-crushing technique 2, Foot of the Heavenly Tao. A kick imbued with the essential great Tao of heaven and earth. Initial mastery allows one to shatter space. Phenomenal mastery allows one to sink entire continents and send anything flying. Heaven-crushing technique 3, Fist of the Heavenly Tao. A punch imbued with the essential great Tao of heaven and earth. Initial mastery allows one to shatter space and destroy all things. Heaven-crushing technique 8, Tao of Darkness. A punch imbued with the essential power of darkness. Initial mastery allows one to shatter space and destroy all things. Under normal circumstances, the system would only awaken one cultivation method at a time. However, it was as if he had opened a series of treasure chests. The system had instantly imparted many spell techniques to him, all of which were extremely powerful. How could Lin accept this? Every time Chen Chen used a new heaven-crushing technique, it would be recorded and analyzed by the system before being imparted to Lin. Chen Chen was most likely aware of this, as he had witnessed the entire process of Lin secretly learning from Lin during the free-for-all battle, and he knew that Enlin had the ability to instantly master a technique. This meant that Chun Chun was doing this on purpose. During this battle against the heavenly time god, he was truly trying to teach Enlin how to battle the heavens. Furthermore, he was teaching him step by step without any reservations. That's right, this was the Heaven-Crushing Sect's generous gift pack for heaven-crushing techniques. Enlin was on the verge of breaking down. He had no choice but to accept such a huge gift. But to be honest, he actually didn't want to accept these spells. After all, the greater the power, the greater the responsibility. If others were to give you all kinds of heaven-defying moves, shouldn't you do something? Enlin just wanted to be a salted fish. Right at this moment, Chun Chun and the heavenly time god had already separated. The clash between the two seemed to have ended in a draw. Chun Chun's right hand was a little shriveled and aged. As for the heavenly time god, her palm had already been shattered into specks of light. The heavenly time god chuckled coldly. Time reversal. The specks of light converged, forming a complete palm once again. She was slender and extremely agile. She looked at Chun Chun with a smug expression, as if to say, "I have unlimited regenerative abilities, how are you going to fight me?" Gotcha! A crisp crack suddenly erupted. The heavenly time god's expression gradually congealed, and she rolled her eyes, as if she wanted to see her divine halo. A sixth crack began to appear on her divine halo. The divine halo, which had originally appeared to be extremely intricate and holy, was now riddled with cracks, as if it were a piece of jade that was about to shatter. Ah, my. The heavenly time god seemed to have been severely traumatized, and she couldn't even speak properly. At this moment, Chun Chun had already appeared before the heavenly time god again. In the sky above, dark clouds suddenly surged, and a golden light broke through the very center of the vortex. There seemed to be a boundless sea of light within the golden light. However, this was actually the light of a divine weapon. The divine weapon fell from the sky and landed in Chun Chun's hand. This was a sword that was as dazzling as gold and as smooth as a mirror, reflecting heaven and earth. 9 mysterious ancient spell formations formed a series of halos of light that revolved around the blade of the sword. Each of the halos was imbued with earth-shattering might, and the 9 halos combined to create a peerless divine might. This is the final attack. Heaven-crushing technique, sword of the heavenly Tao. Chun Chun wielded his devastating longsword, and the heavenly time god's body began to crack open like a spiderweb as her sword intent swept forth. I won't be able to block this sword strike. A cruel smile appeared on the heavenly time god's face. But I don't need to. She took off the divine halo from her head and swallowed it. Chun Chun was suddenly struck by a sense of foreboding, and he immediately slashed his sword toward the heavenly time god. Let's die together. Let's fall into the endless cycle of time and die billions of times. The heavenly time god let loose a final roar like a wild beast, and her entire body self-detonated before Chun Chun's sword of the heavenly Tao had even landed. Boom! All of a sudden, heaven and earth tremored violently. A massive amount of light soared into the sky. It was imbued with unfathomable power of time, and it flowed into the heavens like a stream of water. Senior student Chun Chun. Enlin let loose a panicked yell at the sight of the pillar of light that had instantly engulfed Chun Chun. However, he was only worried about Chun Chun for a short while before he began to worry about himself. This was because he discovered that the pillar of light was expanding outward. Run! Enlin yelled. The celestial Dharch reacted the quickest, and he sprinted for 50 kilometers with Enlin in his arms. The great Empress, Mengji, and Shangguan Yi followed closely behind him. However, the pillar of light was expanding far faster than they had imagined, and it caught up to them in the blink of an eye before engulfing them. Chun Chun! Master! On a crystal palace, the ancient dragon Empress and Shui Zhantian yelled at the same time. The snow maidens in the distance also yelled the great Empress and Shangguan Yi's names. After the pillar of light expanded to its limit, It began to slowly shrink until it became a speck of light that disappeared between heaven and earth. Meanwhile, an indistinct burst of power returned to heaven and earth. The sky was still the same sky, but it was a little different. Everyone turned their attention back to where they had been. Chun Chun, Enlin, the celestial Dharch, and even the great empress, Shangguan Yi and Meng Ji were nowhere to be seen. It was as if they had never existed in the first place. Master! Shui Zhantian stared blankly at the empty battlefield, and tears finally began to flow from his eyes as he recalled the heavenly time god's threat to perish together with Enlin. Wah! Master, how could you die like this? You died at such a young age. While the ancient dragon empress was also in a daze. The second heavenly disciple of the heaven-crushing sect had died just like that? He had been fighting with ease during the battle, so how could he have died? Chapter 1449. The battle finally drew to a conclusion. The death timer in the minds of all the snow maidens disappeared. It had disappeared along with the heavenly time god's death. However, the snow maidens couldn't bring themselves to rejoice. Enlin had died, their great empress had died, and their beloved high priestess, Meng Ji, and Shangguan Yi had died. Oh, the celestial Dharch had also died. The heavenly time god had taken all the important people with her when she perished. All of the snow maidens fell into an irrepressible silence and grief. Yanhua stood on the shattered ground and raised her head. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked up at the empty space in front of her. Enlin, come back. You still have the inheritance of the snow maidens. Her voice reverberated through the air, but no one responded. Tears streamed down her face. If you don't come back, I'm going to break my promise. However, the only response she received was a frosty gust of wind. All of the snow maidens looked up at the holy palace leader with grief on their faces. By the way, why did palace leader Yan Hua call for Enlin instead of our great empress? One of the snow maidens suddenly asked. All of the snow maidens. An older snow maiden stepped forward. That's because Enlin isn't a member of our snow maiden tribe, but he still stood up and sacrificed his life to save us. He is the hero of our tribe, and we should always respect him and remember him. All of the snow maidens were instantly filled with deep veneration upon hearing this. The snow maiden who had questioned Yan Hua was also extremely ashamed, and tears welled up in her eyes. I was wrong. I shouldn't have misunderstood palace leader Yan Hua. Sect leader Enlin, I'm so sorry. At this moment, Rogu, Su Jingxiang, and the other palace leaders also made their way over to Yan Hua to console her. Yan Hua was usually very stubborn, but she was now sobbing her heart out. They'll definitely come back, right? Just like how they were sucked into the 1,000-year sword, someone will be able to break through it and save them, right? That's right, Sister Hua, don't be sad. Su Jingxiang spoke with a sympathetic expression. They all knew that the 1,000-year sword was only a technique, and it was not something that the heavenly time god's self-detonation could compare with. Right now, Enlin and the others might be trapped somewhere else, but they might have already been blown to smithereens. However, whether he was dead or alive, he wanted to see his corpse. Perhaps, Yan Hua's speculation could also become the hope of the crowd. The impact of the incident was still fermenting. Within the imperial palace of the celestial court, the jade tablet of the celestial sovereign suddenly cracked, and the 4 sovereigns were shocked. 4-9 Immortal Sect. Little Tian, you're finally back. Enlin said he was going to look for you. Didn't he come back with you? Su Xiaolan smiled brightly when she saw the snowball in front of her in the flame pavilion. What? Su Xiaolan. Master. Master is dead. Shui Zhantian sobbed into Su Xiaolan's arms. Su Xiaolan faltered slightly before stroking Shui Zhantian's soft, white fur with a smile. Don't joke around. Enlin is the most prodigious man in this world. Even the heavens couldn't do anything to him during that battle with the heavenly wind god, so how could he have died? This is absolutely true. I saw it with my own eyes. His opponent was a heavenly time god, and it self-detonated in the end. Not only master, but even the celestial Dharch and the great empress. Shui Zhantian didn't even get a chance to finish his sentence before his body was blasted through the roof of the flame pavilion like a cannonball. Only Su Xiaolan's enraged roar reverberated throughout heaven and earth. I'm not listening. F***ck off. News of the celestial Thearcha's death and Enlin's death couldn't be kept a secret. They had to hold funerals for the great empress, Mengji and Shangguan. The Snow Maidens held lavish funerals for the great empress, Mengji and Shangguan. At the same time, they also held lavish funerals for the celestial Dharch, Enlin and Chen. The news of the funerals created a massive stir across the entire Tai Chu continent. This was a monumental event that only happened once in 10,000 years, and the repercussions it brought were even more earth-shattering. Some people didn't believe it, some people wept tears of anguish, and some people lived in fear. It was quite clear that if this was true, then it would be an extremely heavy blow to the human race and the Snow Maidens. The Heavenly Court and the 4-9 Immortal Sect had both chosen to remain silent. Thus, many living beings were still in disbelief that the supremely talented prodigy who had risen to prominence in just a few short years and was renowned across the entire continent, as well as the monarch who had ruled over the kingdom of the 9 states for countless years, would fall just like that. However, all of this was confirmed a month later. A month later, the Celestial Court announced that they would hold a funeral for the Celestial Dharch and the Celestial Court War God Enlin. The entire world was shaken by this announcement. The Celestial Court officially confirmed the deaths of the Celestial Dharch and Enlin, and this news created a massive stir across the entire Tai Chu continent. Countless mighty figures came from all over the continent to offer their condolences. There were representatives from the Hall of Creation, the Western Paradise, the Holy Paradise, the Dragon Court, the Opposite Shore Realm, the Spirit Lake Realm, the Southern Heavenly Wing Nation, and other powers. However, the West Sea Alliance and the 4-9 Immortal Sect didn't send a single representative. The 4-9 Immortal Sect refused to admit that their sect leader had perished. The world merely thought that they couldn't accept the fact that their sect leader had perished, so they didn't really care. Not long after that, all of the higher-ups of the Snow Maiden race announced that the entire Snow Maiden race would submit to the 4-9 Immortal Sect and would listen to their commands. This announcement created another massive stir across the entire continent. The repercussions of this event were still brewing, and it would most likely be difficult to quell in a short time. Many living beings were merely astonished by the deaths of a few mighty figures. However, the super mighty figures who truly stood at the pinnacle of the continent had already sensed lethal danger from this event. Within a vast expanse of darkness, after what seemed like an eternity, all of a sudden, a gentle voice sounded. Enlin! Enlin! His consciousness slowly returned. He felt as if he had been struck by lightning upon hearing this familiar voice, and he immediately sprang up. I don't want to drink the medicine. I don't want to drink the medicine. Bam! Ow! Enlin felt as if he had bumped his head into something, and it hurt a little. He immediately opened his eyes, and his vision gradually cleared, only to discover that Shangguan was holding her intricate nose with her hand as she looked at him with an aggrieved expression. I'm sorry. Enlin only now realized that he had sprang up too suddenly, and he had bumped Shangguan Yi's nose. It's all right. Shangguan Yi rubbed her nose as she turned toward Enlin. Why did you yell at me that I don't want to drink the medicine? An awkward smile appeared on Enlin's face upon hearing this. It's nothing, I just had a nightmare. He looked at Shangguan Yi's extremely beautiful features, and memories flooded back to him like a tidal wave. He recalled the perilous battle that the heavenly time god had endured, as well as how she had been forced to self-detonate in the end. He was a little elated. Who would have thought that we would still be alive? Actually, we're not much better off than dead. Look around, Shangguan Yi said. Enlin looked around, and his pupils contracted as an expression of shock appeared on his face. Holy F***ck. What is this place? Chapter 1450. And Lin discovered that he was situated in an extremely peculiar space. This space was a vast expanse of pure golden color, and it appeared to be boundless. The ground was also golden in color, but he didn't know what material it was made of, but it was very soft and warm. A golden river surged in front of them, and they didn't know where it ended. Just looking at these images was actually quite a good idea. However, that river struck fear into Lin's heart. What was reflected in the river was not his face, but countless images. Those images were extremely terrifying, and they were tortures that the world did not dare to imagine. For example, insect eggs were implanted into one's body, which would constantly absorb nutrients from the host. The host's body would decay day by day, and their flesh would be devoured by the insects that hatched from the eggs. In the end, not even the bones would be left, and all of the living beings in the images would wail in anguish and despair. Above the river, there were many similar tortures, and even more terrifying tortures were innumerable. One after another, different kinds of torture scenes flowed forward like an endless river. Shangguan-yi made her way over to Lin. If it weren't for the fact that Chen Chen used a spell technique to teleport us to the shore before we fell into the river, perhaps we would have had to experience all of the tortures on the river. Lin's flesh crawled upon hearing this. Any one of the tortures on the river would be a fate worse than death, but he had almost had to experience all of them? He looked at the surging river with a dark expression. There's no F***king end to this. Endless torture, it's simply the most terrifying hell in the world. Perhaps the heavenly time god placed all of the cruel tortures she had seen on this river. Shangguan-yi was also feeling a little fearful after witnessing this scene. So cruel. She said before she died that she was going to make us fall into an endless cycle of time and die billions of times. Who would have thought that we would die like this? Lin sighed with emotion. He suddenly felt like Su Xiaolan's punishment of feeding him poison was like a dream come true. It had to be said that the heavenly time god's self-detonation was nowhere near as powerful as the 1,000-year sword. Lin suddenly recalled that Chen Chen was able to defend against the heavenly time god's self-detonation and save them in the process. Wasn't that even more bad *SS? By the way, where is Chen Chen? Lin asked. Shangguan-yi pointed a finger toward the river. He's in the river. Lin was shocked. Then, his eyes reddened and he almost burst into tears. He sobbed. Who would have thought that Senior Chen Chen would sacrifice himself in order to save us? He even had to endure such terrifying pain. What are you thinking about? Shangguan-yi rolled her eyes at Lin. Chen Chen must have gone into the river to find his way back. Perhaps he can find a way back in the river of time. He'll be fine, right? Does it hurt? Lin asked worriedly. A smile appeared on Shangguan-yi's face. Your senior, Chen Chen, is very powerful. He has a special way to keep the river of time at bay. He had already taught the method to the great Empress, Mengji, and the Celestial Larch, and all four of them were currently searching the river of time for a way back. I'll stay here to look after you. Everyone's risking their lives to get out of here. Lin looked around at the vast expanse of golden light around him and realized that he had been trapped in this strange space. He couldn't use his spatial powers here, so he had no sense of direction. The only clue he had was the surging river before him, which was a river that recorded the cruelest torture in this world. Looking at this river for too long would make one dizzy and nauseated. Lin couldn't take it anymore after looking at it for a while. This was much more thrilling than watching any horror movie. Any one of these scenes could make a normal person lose their soul or make them feel nauseated to the point where they wouldn't be able to eat for days. Lin found a place to sit down before pulling out a spirit fruit and munching on it. Shangguan-yi also made her way over and sat down beside Lin with a smile on her flawless features. It's very uncomfortable, isn't it? I felt even worse than you when I saw this river before, so I threw up right away. Lin turned to Shangguan Yi with a hint of surprise on his face, as if he didn't think that the legendary reincarnation of the Ice Matriarch would have such weak resistance. Shangguan Yi's legs were bent over, and her chin was resting on her knees. Her golden eyes, which were filled with a sense of majesty, gradually disappeared, and a hint of vulnerability and melancholy appeared on her face. She spoke in a soft voice, "Look at those tortures. Even if I were to exhaust my imagination, I wouldn't be able to come up with anything like that, let alone the living beings that are being tortured. But in the river of time, there are almost no end to these types of tortures. Tell me, why are there so many living beings that are so depraved?" Lin couldn't help but smile upon hearing Shangguan Yi's words. "There are all kinds of birds in a big forest. Can we think of a way to kill all of the bad birds in this forest? Or make sure that the bad birds don't even get a chance to be born?" Shangguan Yi continued. Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this. Why did this sound like the ramblings of a little girl? It was as if she were roaring, "All the bad people in this world should die. In this world, where there is good, there is also evil." Lin thought to himself for a moment before replying, "Perhaps the reason why bad people exist is to accentuate the greatness of the good." Shangguan Yi was quite amused by Lin's choice of words. Now that she thought about it, it did make sense. If there was black, there would be white. Only when there were dirty things would they accentuate the greatness of the good. There weren't many demonic sects to accentuate the righteous sects, so who would they accentuate the greatness of the righteous sects? However, people didn't like things that were black. Just like how everyone liked cleanliness, no one liked something that was filthy. Actually, I've always wanted to make the snow maidens into living beings that everyone loves. Shangguan Yi looked at Lin and said, "It's a pity that even though they're quite beautiful, they're all quite cold and aloof, just like the aloof goddesses you guys talk about. They're very cold and aloof, and they're very unapproachable to outsiders." As time passed, no other living beings were willing to interact with us. A smile appeared on Lin's face. "So it was very rare for me to receive such warm hospitality from all of you?" "Not just rare, even the great Empress hasn't received such warm hospitality from them." A vibrant smile appeared on Shangguan Yi's face. Lin couldn't help but reminisce about the warm hospitality he had received from the Snow Maidens. "Lin," a gentle voice sounded beside his ear. Lin turned around to discover that Shangguan Yi was looking at him with a gentle expression on her face. Her pink lips trembled slightly, as if she wanted to say something. Lin's heart jolted, and his first reaction was, "No, Shangguan Yi. There's no way we can be together. Xiaolan will force me to drink medicine." "Lin, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry." A guilty expression appeared on Shangguan Yi's face, and she lowered her head. Lin faltered slightly upon hearing this. Things seemed to be developing in a different direction than he had imagined. "I'm the one who dragged you down with me. If it weren't for my request, you wouldn't have encountered so many life-threatening situations. I'm a jinx, it's all my fault." She hugged her bent legs with her arms and buried her head in her arms. She curled her body into a ball and sobbed in a low voice, "Whoever meets me will be unlucky. I've tried my best, but whoever meets me will be unlucky. Should I not get close to anyone? Or should I not even exist in this world?" Lin was still in a daze. He looked at the woman who had suddenly burst into tears, and he was at a complete loss for what to do.